Do you have somebody else edit for you?
Yeah, yeah. I've got a very wonderful editor named Contrast who does all of my editing for me for YouTube.
That is,
Um, it's
I'm
amazing,
jealous. Yeah.
truly.
So you just do the stream and then you sit back and watch your YouTube
And I
videos
just
go up.
sit
That's
back and do
awesome.
nothing. I'm just a lazy slob the rest of the day. I'm just kidding. It's
I
actually
mean,
interesting. It's interesting moving into like because being a streamer, especially if you're like wanting to monetize it full time, is
mhm,
basically like owning a small business.
it
And
literally
between
is. Yeah.
my husband and I now both basically have so he has a small business that he's been running and trying to start up for about a year. And now I have this. And so like both of us just have like endless to-dos. It's a very weird world of like my to-do list will never shrink ever because there's just always things that I could be doing as a small business owner. It's very weird.
I mean, I uh, I'm not like a super heavy streamer. I just started doing this video, and everybody in the whole world said yes when I asked. It's
Oh,
been
really?
ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And I took the entire weekend off. I didn't edit anything. I didn't. Well, I popped into one guy's stream because that was they were talking about really interesting things, and he opened up to whoever wanted to just talk to the person he was talking to. But
Mm.
I made myself not touch any of it because I was completely overworked. Like coming home from work and then doing a stream or preparing for a stream and like writing down questions and everything. And that was just like like 10 days of streaming like every other day, and I just dead. Like
Mm.
5 to 3 hours of sleep every night, and just it was a lot. I don't know. I mean, if you do it full time and that's your main thing, it's probably a little bit different, but it's a lot of work. I think if you haven't like really had to like move quickly from thing to thing and like that involves prep with it, I think people have
Yeah.
a really weird image of how much time and energy it takes.
Yeah, I think it's probably really depends on the type of streaming content that you're doing.
Sure.
Um, and so, I mean, you're doing streaming content with the goal of making a documentary, which is like a very large project. So the amount of work that's going to be entitled with that is a lot larger than people, for example, who are like almost exclusively gamers. So they're going to have a lot of back end like emails and Discord stuff to manage. But then once they're on stream and they're prep for stream, I would assume is probably a little bit less. Whereas like somebody like Rhizome tends to like pre-prepare his content. He's got like a list of things he seems to want to go through and just kind of runs through his content for about like 2 to 4 hours. And so I
Mhm.
imagine his back end is much larger as a result, which is probably in part why he streams a little less often and he's a full-time teacher. So, having a full-time
Sure.
job is probably also makes that difficult. Are you planning to turn on your cam or are you going to pull my VOD? Or are you going to do it all on your end so I don't need to worry about it?
You know what? Let me think about. Let me see if I can do the virtual camera on here too.
And just so you know, I don't know if you're push to talking or if it's your mic, but it's
Oh,
cutting off just as you tip down towards the end of your sentence.
how is that? Is that better?
That is better.
Okay.
We'll have to test it out and see.
Oh,
It wasn't
and
the volume, it was mostly the cutting off.
none. There we go. And I don't think I can. Yeah, I think you're the first person that ever asked me about my camera. Um, well, because I have it set up through OBS, and I don't know why OBS hates me. Or not OBS. I don't know why Discord virtual camera hates me. It never wants to work.
Mm.
Uh, is it a problem for you if I have my camera on my stream?
No, not at all. You
Okay.
do whatever your heart tells you. This is for your documentary, so like I'm
So,
not picky. This is like more for you. So I'm just asking what you want because I don't know if you're going to be stealing. Like some people want to get both VODs just to like see if there's comparisons in like audio and stuff. So I just figured I want to make sure that my VOD for our portion is potentially what you might need in case you need to steal any portion of it. So I am content with whatever.
okay.
Although my dog is screaming, can you give me 2 seconds to let her in?
Absolutely. Even before she came on here, Erudite's so fucking nice. It's unreal. But to be fair, she's Canadian, so I get it. Makes sense. This tracks. Audio is better there on her end than my end. Is that what you're saying, Cam? I can always do that then. By the way, I just want to say you're so nice. There are all our conversations.
I'm not nice. I'm kind, typically.
I don't I don't know if I distinguish a difference between those two things.
That's fair. I guess in Canada land, there's oftentimes a pretty big difference between nice and mean because most Canadians are nice. Most Canadians are also not kind, though.
You
Like
know, as soon as
they'll
you
give
said
you lip
Canada,
service. Yeah.
yeah, as soon as you said in Canada land, it clicked in my head. I also want to say too, I don't know how I would not be able to say it, but I always think of myself like an alienated Canadian patriot. I love Canada so much. I really do. Like Canada just always seems like everything that America pretends that they aren't. Or
Interesting.
sorry, everything that America pretends to be. Sorry. And I really like Canada. I don't hate the United States or anything like that. I'm not jumping on the like the United States is terrible, we should burn it down, any of that kind of rhetoric. The US is fine. I fancy Canada. I got the enhanced license so I can go there whenever I want.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you live here, you have to be grateful for the benefits conferred living here. I mean, you're like obviously in like the top like what 5-10% of like the entire global population that lives in like a liberal democracy with universal healthcare. So there's a
Right?
lot of cons that come with some of the things. Like there's a lot of cons with how our universal healthcare system works specifically. But obviously, it's hard to complain about it in comparison to like other
United
people's
States.
situations. Yeah, yeah.
Whenever somebody tries to say anything to me like, yeah, but you have to wait, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I'd rather wait than have no access to care at all, like a lot of people I know. But you know, to each their own.
The main thing is specialists here. So that's where you get really dinged is if you have like if you have a chronic illness or anything that needs more specialized care, you're a little bit fucked. Like, for example, I basically have been labeled as mystery chronic illness, where I've seen basically all of the top specialists that could possibly try to figure out what's going on with like I have a really weird issue with water. Like I'm chronically dehydrated like everywhere, but my kidneys are working normally, but like my skin is like the muscle tissue's dry. I have like such dry eyes that like no matter the amount of drops I put in, I can't wear contacts at all. And just like constant Charlie horsing and just a bunch of like there's more to it, but it's like more getting into TMI and stuff. And they're
Sure.
basically like, you have mystery, recessive, genetic, maybe autoimmune thing. And I'm like, good diagnosis, doc. And they're like, we don't know what it is. And there's nothing we can do about it, but try again in 10 years. And you're like, great.
Damn.
So that's like the big con about us is that the brain drain, just specialists just don't stay here. They all go to the States because there's just more money there.
Yeah,
That's the
that's
biggest
fair.
issue. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I get that, but I think I'd rather deal with that issue personally.
That's
If
fair.
I had. By the way, I know you and even Max and a bunch of other people has referred to my video project as a documentary. I
Was it not?
wouldn't call it not exactly like there's definitely documentary there's going to be like a large documentary section, but there's going to be other elements in it altogether. That's why I really don't know what I would call it exactly. But I think that my end goal is to provide an honest representation of how people how the community as a whole feels about him, how I feel about him, and what I think is happening after doing all of this. And then I have some other like artistic presentation like put throughout it and different spots of it. So I know I'll have some like live like shot footage that I'll shoot like IRL too. I just think that like framing it entirely as a documentary isn't exactly what I'm trying to do, but I do want to bring the kind of truth and honesty that a documentary does, and it will be a part of it.
Okay. Cool. What change my title in? It says documentary. Do you want me to change it to like interview about Mr. Girl?
You can call it whatever you want. I think people are going to call this a documentary even after it comes out anyways. I don't think that what it's going to be called is really up to me. I just like to kind of correct that the best that I can, just so that when people see other elements in it, they're like, "Hey, he said it was going to be a documentary." Well, he didn't say, but I understand that that's how it's. I don't think I know how to not project that that's what I'm going for when I'm doing these style of things.
Yeah, that's fair. Very self-aware.
Um, so before I ask you the first question, I want to ask you about Max. I really want to ask you about your name because whenever I think about it, like I know what it means, but it's really ironic because like to have that name kind of makes you seem smart just on the basis of having that name, but the name kind of implies otherwise.
It's so I'm starting to realize that my style of humor is I'm probably not established enough. So I engage in like a lot of post irony, like a lot of post irony. Um and so like having there be a little bit of, I mean, this one at this point, my name is kind of meta irony, where basically like nobody really knows what it's implying or how I feel about it, and that's like kind of the funny part about it, is it's like supposed to be like, who knows? Just judge for yourself. Basically, my husband came up with it because I'm really bad at naming anything. As you can tell, the company that I had to name when I worked previously was just called Mental Help. And it was just a mental health prevention program, which, if that's not the most uncreative fucking name for something, I don't know what is. Um, and so I wanted, when I transitioned to being more online, I wanted to have a online handle because I just wanted a level of separation from my actual name. Not that I hide like that my name is Kyla and stuff, but it's nice to have like a gap so that if people Google like my full name, my like videos where I'm like screaming about bestiality doesn't immediately come up. Um, so he was just like brainstorming and he was like, well, how do you think about erudite? And I was like, well, that feels like a really weird brag. Like, I'm so smart. And he was like, I thought you were going to say that. So how do you feel about not so erudite? It's kind of fun. We could brand a lot of things with like not so, and then insert different words like not so fitness, not so like any, if I ever wanted to like turn this into a company and branch it in different directions, the not so name actually works really well. Creates like a pretty easy inside joke. Plus the word erudite is, it's nice because it's like a single word that people can call me, but it's somewhat feminine as well, which was kind of the goal, is to have like an online handle that's a little bit feminine, and suited me as well. So that's what he suggested, and I was like, that's pretty good. And then we voted on it with a couple of our like small community members from TikTok, and the name just stuck. So that's kind of the story of it.
Well, yeah, I think it's a funny. I think that there's I see the humor in the name. So
Mm.
I'm glad to know the story. I'm sure you've told that a lot of times. I haven't been privy to it, but so thank you. Um, so I've watched a lot of your stuff on YouTube mostly. I've been trying to hop into your Twitch more like the last week or so, but so from all the things that I've gathered between you and Mr. Girl, the thing that I found most personally interesting was how you felt about his art. And
Mm.
you said at one point that he might be your favorite artist. And I was driving when I said that, and I think I like what's the word? Like kind of like automatic response, like I hit my brakes a little bit, and I was like, "Oh, sorry." My wife looked at me and she's like, "What was that for?" And I was like, "That," and then just kind of like just like gesturing at my phone without having to look at it. Uh, and I know, but since then too, you've said some other things in between. It's like, where do you stand on the art now?
So all of his older stuff, I still love it.
Mhm.
I have very complex views of people, which means I can appreciate work that they've done and also not appreciate other work that they've done. So like all the stuff that I used to love, I also still love, and I wish he did more of it, because it seems like he's leaning a lot more into the interviews, um, and more of the live streaming stuff. And I can understand that in a lot of ways. People's interest changes. They don't owe viewers anything necessarily. Um, it's also, I think live content is a little bit easier to make, as far as like monetary, of like you can just pump more content out more quickly. Whereas like a video essay often takes like months of filming, recording, editing before you can ever publish it and really like get any returns from it. So I don't know exactly like his thought process behind it, but I think it's extremely understandable. Every now and then he'll release like a different video essay that I really, really love, that I think is like funny, but none of them have been what his like, especially his main channel, Mr. Girl, used to be. Like none of them is like peaked as much as like some of his old stuff. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's just like my personal preference or whatever, but yeah, that's how I've been kind of feeling about it recently.
Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense then. Um, so because almost nobody really talks about how they view his work in that respect. It's always with some kind of like connotation about like how good or bad it is to be platforming it, or like nobody just talks about enjoying it that has a voice. And I that's really interesting to me. So could we take just like at least a couple minutes to like kind of talk about it and like nerd out about it? Because like I really like his main channel content too, and I don't think I'm gonna run into anybody else that's uh, capable of doing so without having to like explain a bunch of things ahead of time or anything. So like,
Sure.
what's one of your favorites?
I'm trying to pull up, so I'm terrible for remembering names of anything. So I'm just gonna pull up his channel. Because there's one in my head. I know the exact thumbnail. I just need to find it. Hold on.
Yeah, and I feel you with the names. I can't name anything ever.
Okay, videos. I wonder if it's gonna be one of his most popular.
You know what it's about? I can maybe help you.
It's where he basically talks about like getting kicked out of school a bunch and like how he wrote a paper, like critiquing his school, and it like started at like high school, I think, and he got like kicked out a bunch and like kept coming against resistance. And he kind of like points to some hypocrisy where they're like, "We want you to like be avant-garde and share your ideas," and then he like does that, and they're like, "Stop." And kind of he points to some like the irony, but also like some of the hypocrisy within um, things around like speech and art. Trying to think.
I'm looking for it now too.
The monster I've been fighting my this monster I've been fighting my whole life is definitely like one of my absolute favorites of his.
I really
With
liked
like
it.
the art.
Um, that one's kind of new, right? Comparatively.
That one
Let's go into
is
thumbnails as well.
1 year ago. I really liked Debate Doesn't Lead to Truth, which is about 2 years ago. Um,
Oh wait.
it's also ironic. um, trying to look through. I'm looking through his stuff and just seeing which one I've like watched fully through because those are probably ones that I've liked a lot. Um, there was one he did around black white relations as well that I know I didn't watch on his channel. I think somebody posted it in my Discord that I also really, really enjoyed
Oh,
recently.
was that the one where he interviewed his roommate at the time, or was it one of the other
Free speech is
ones?
hate speech. I really like free speech is hate speech. I recognize that thumbnail. Mm. Now I know why I don't remember his names. They're really long titles for his videos. So you're like, what is this video about again?
Yeah, I really like the Mr. Girl splaining ones.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of them are really good. Even if so a lot of them that I like, I don't even know if I agree with even what he's saying, but I really like the way that he kind of levies his critiques. He uses a lot of like irony and like kind of juxtaposes like statements against statements and stuff like that. On top of like kind of creative plugs towards like movies, like other famous movies and scenes from it. His video quality alone is just like phenomenal. Um, I like a lot of his music, like his rap album. I like a lot of his rap album.
Love it.
Yeah, I'm a pedophile, and I Kill Pedophiles are just my two favorite. I can fantasize about whatever I want. I also really like that one. Again, just because I like it doesn't mean that I agree even with all of it. I just
Sure.
can recognize art. I feel like people have this weird relationship with art. And maybe I just have an esoteric relationship with art. Maybe that's the problem. But
I I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I
Oh,
paused.
I think that yeah, people are. I feel like a lot of people think that you can't enjoy art without it being like embedded in your personality.
Hmm.
Or like I know a lot of times when uh, somebody really likes a band and if they come out with like a bad album, I'll like sort of watch them like go through a phase where they really try to support it before they kind of like come to the conclusion later that they really didn't like it. Or if like an actor they really like has a bad movie, they'll just kind of hold on to it and try to defend it tooth and nail instead of just being able to appreciate that sometimes people I like make things that I don't like.
Yeah, kind of that like nuanced, which is like I think why people are like shocked when I say like I really like Mr. Girl's art. They're like, "What do you mean? You guys have like a tense relationship and you guys disagree?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but that doesn't mean that I can't appreciate other like elements of what he does." Like I think everything about President Sunday sucks, but he still has a just lovely voice to listen to. It's just nice. It's just got a nice voice. He says weird shit, but it's got a nice voice. Like you can appreciate elements of people without appreciating all of, like it's like we don't have this conception of like how you can appreciate parts of people and not the whole self, or you can appreciate the whole self but also disagree with parts of them.
Yeah, I think that's just a big problem for people in general. I think that when I tell people I don't agree with them about something, they feel like I'm trying to like make a statement about them too. It's really weird
Mhm.
how people have a trouble separating things.
Yeah.
Where do you think the cutoff point is for the quality of the videos? Because I think one of my favorites is a later on one. I don't
I
forget
don't
what it
think there's
is.
a perfect cutoff. It's just it feels like he was popping out like banger after banger, and now every now and then there'll be one where I'm like, that's pretty good. Like I like the old people hate you, but I didn't love the old people hate you video. But like it was pretty good. It was pretty good, but it wasn't like I, that's the issue is I don't feel like I've seen like a banger in a while where I'm just like I like watch it and I'm just like damn I don't even know if I agree but that was so brilliantly put together. Like that's something that I think I get a lot from a lot of older Mr. Girl content is that even if I like walk away being like oh like I don't feel comfortable with what he's saying necessarily, I'm still left sitting there being like but fuck he's so brilliant, like this is so brilliantly put together, like it's just so smart or like creative. um and I just haven't had that feeling from his content in the last several months. So I don't have like this hard cutoff line where
Okay.
I'm like, from here on, it now sucks. I just, it makes me concerned that something's changed. Um, and that makes me sad because if it has changed, that's in part the nature of artists, right? Artists change over
Sure.
time.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but as somebody who consumes the artistry, they can be like, oh, this sucks. Now I don't like this artist's new stuff. So I don't have new things to consume and appreciate.
Yeah. I think I understand. I think I guess I don't know where it's at on here. That doesn't really matter. I think that the main content channel is like 90% hits for me, and there's a couple of them that are just kind of like, oh, okay. But I think one of the things that I really like is that even when I don't agree with him, that due to the presentation and I guess I didn't really consider until you brought it up, like how he presents it, like artistically, like really helps. But I think that a lot of times I still feel like he's being honest and he's not like especially if it's around like a touchy subject, like if it's about like trans people when I don't agree, I'm not mad that I'm not mad at him for having another opinion. Whereas a lot of times when I don't agree with somebody on it, I get a little mad because I feel like they're being irrational or that they're coming from a place of hate. And it never feels like that. I never get like that visceral uh, sensation when I hear something that I don't agree with coming out of any of his videos.
That's interesting. I wouldn't say I even agree, right? Like if I look back at how I learned to stop hitting women,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think I get a lot of like visceral hate. Like he's got a lot of stuff with his mom, really understandable stuff, by the way. Right when you hear the stories about like his mom and stuff, you're just like, ooh, like that is really inappropriate. Um, I
Oh,
guess people's feelings isn't like the feel I do get feelings of hate. I think it's authentic. So if you're talking about like authenticity, yeah. I think a lot of his old stuff was just really authentic. And that I think that's a little bit part of it is I don't think he's being unauthentic now. I'm worried that he's engaging in like some unhealthy self-introspection, which causes him to be like not seeing the world, and therefore like some of the critiques now that he levies or some of the things that he tries to point out in culture, they just don't hit, right? Whereas before, like every video there'd be something where I'm like, oh man, yeah, like that's a really valid criticism. I don't even know if I agree fully with the criticism or if I care, but like that's, he's intuited something there. It feels like that's happening less and less often. So it could be that I've just had a negative experience with him and that's turned me off, but I would expect that that would turn me off of it now his older videos, because I've gone back and watched older videos and been like super into it again and been like, oh man, this is so fucking great. So hard to say.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to tell how we're consuming art, dependent on how we're feeling about the artist too.
Mm-hmm.
Because I
Mm-hmm.
think that some artists like yeah, I don't know if like maybe we just still like the old stuff because we already liked it, and so therefore like we can't change how we think about it very much. I don't know. That's really interesting to bring up. I didn't uh I didn't really consider that before. I really liked and I found out recently too this like a lot of people's favorites like the how I became a people pleaser kind of sold me on him.
Mm.
And I really liked how the beginning has like the really cringy makeup and stuff to kind of make you feel uncomfortable in like a counterintuitive way because like the makeup's bad and like the reference to the Joker is just kind of like okay, but then I really 'cause I think I was sort of on the fence. I like listened to a couple of songs. The first time I listened to one of his songs, I was in like a very public place with an earbud in, and I was kind of like hoping nobody heard what I heard. And then I think I came home and watched this shortly after that, and I think that being uncomfortable is part of it. I think that when he's expressing the things that he's talking about, when they're uncomfortable subjects, I feel like a lot of people when they talk about things that make people uncomfortable, they want to make sure that the audience doesn't feel uneasy about it. They want to pad it up so that way you hear them in a more calming and gentle way so that you're more receptive. Whereas Max will be like, no, this shit's uncomfortable. Get in here with I'm uncomfortable talking about it. I want you to be uncomfortable hearing it. Let's experience the thing together. And I think that's kind of where I was like, yeah, you got me. I'm sold.
Yeah, and I think he did that a lot before, where he would say things that were uncomfortable, but they were deep, like they were often like decently true, or they at least like weren't hyperbolic. Recently, it's felt like sometimes when he like settles into something that's uncomfortable that we need to face, it also feels hyperbolic. Like it feels like things are stated in the most like edgy way possible, which feels pretty unnecessary. And I just don't get those vibes from his older videos. And so I'm not sure if that's because like his personality is changing and shifting and he's just becoming maybe more like extreme in some of his like feelings about things, or if that's because like he's gaining an audience and kind of learning that people really appreciate like when he's really raw, so he's like leaning into rawness that it feels like, you know, like when 14-year-olds start on Tumblr and they're like a little bit sad and then they're like, oh, this is so validating to like hear people talk about sad, but like 2 years later they're posting like the most like edgy, extreme, like emotionally intense like poetry and stuff like that. um Kind of feels somewhat like that sometimes.
I think that makes sense. And thank you, Sauce of Awesome. I really appreciate you. Um, yeah, it's really hard to tell if it's there's like a million things that could be making the shift. I don't I try really hard not to speculate on it because I just have no idea.
Mhm.
But I would definitely say that it's different, and I think I think I'm just sort of along for the ride, and I'm really interested to see where it goes. And I think sometimes I get a little worried that things are gonna get like really far off from what I like, and that I'll just lose the kind of content that I found that's like really resonates for me. Like
Mm.
that's like I don't think I have a big fall off point for myself, but it kind of just freaks me out that I really enjoy like the rawness and then a lot of the curated content that if it changes too much, it's not so much that like like well I don't like this anymore. I'll just be really sad that I don't have like the thing.
Yeah, yeah, I think I fully resonate with that. I mean, my relationship with this content is like complex, more complex because I have like that certain level of interpersonal relationship as well.
Sure.
So like like I wish I just had like the raw of like, oh, I like this art and I'm sad that it's becoming what I don't like as much. So as a consumer, I'm like, I'm sad, but also like, people get to go on their journeys, that's part of life. But then there's this weird interpersonal piece of also being like, yeah, but I like also thought you were this way as a person, and I feel like some of these things have been like let down. And so there's like this complex element that I like fully recognize that I have with this piece, which is why I'm like willing to be pretty caveating of like, I could be wrong, it could just be my fifis, but I don't know. Max's stuff likes fifi, so that's just kind of where I'm at.
I get that, and thanks for kind of just talking a little bit more passionately about the content than I could usually get with people. I really I think it's really hard to talk to people out in the real world about Mr. Girl because there's like a little bit of explaining that I gotta do first. Like at least at my
Yeah.
job now, I've bled it out slowly enough to where I could have like regular conversations about it or like show a clip and not have like knowingly not have any issues. And that's kind of the reason why I'm making this too is like I hope that people that are big fans of Mr. Girl can kind of point to what I'm making to get a better explanation of what's going on, and that I usually make the joke when I bring them up for the first time, like, don't Google them. But it's kind of like a half joke, like, don't Google them, just talk to me. We can talk about it, and if you want to see a video, I'll point you in the right direction. Because there takes some getting to know the content before you can understand where there is and isn't a joke.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important because I think that people have a really bad way of going, oh, you like this guy that made a song called "I'm a Pedophile. I guess you are or support pedophilia."
Right.
And to a further extent, I don't understand the nuance between the word pedophilia and child molestation. So therefore, you are or support a child molester, or you support child molestation. Like, no, the song was funny, and I do like the person that made that content. And neither of us necessarily believe in either of those things that you just said. So it's kind of awkward to publicly be a Mr. Girl fan, and I really, well, it is. You're in a weird spot because, especially, I feel like if you're a Mr. Girl fan, you probably value honesty and being open about things. That's probably where a lot of people feel that resonance. So it's kind of
Mm.
weird that that's the content that you really like, and you might feel like you're in a tough spot if you want to be open and honest about being a fan of it.
Um, yeah, I think that's really fair. No, I think somebody in chat said normies shouldn't be exposed to Max. I think normies are definitely not ready for Max, and a lot of his critiques he offers are pretty like you need to kind of understand like pretty certain niche communities pretty well. Um, Especially like kind of online political discourse and kind of sociocultural discourse, which if you're not familiar with it, a lot of the things that he talks about are going to be really lost on you, and because they're so edgy, they're definitely not going to like appeal. So I can definitely understand that tension. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird, and I'm kind of like okay navigating it, but I don't know if everybody else can be. So I'm trying to kind of be uh, the person that helps that out because I think I kind of figured out how to address things and
Mm.
the ways to say things. So just hopefully I can present that in a good way where somebody can just hand out. They don't have to worry about the responsibility of explaining why they are wearing a Mr. Girl shirt to their friends or coworkers.
Yeah.
But I'd like to provide that shortcut. Um, so you guys in particular have one of the most interesting like dynamics uh, out of all the people that are semi-regular um, with making content with each other. And I think that the dynamic changes between you guys are really interesting because, like, as a viewer, my perspective seems like it shifts a little bit in one direction or another each time. You guys have like
Mm.
a direct, what do I say, like directly making content, or sometimes something else will happen off screen. That's like whether it's like a Destiny stream or Max will stream with somebody else, and then it'll kind of like tie you guys together in that
Hmm.
situation. And there's another little shift, and like I'm really interested to know how that feels from you because the other thing that I get a lot is that it always seems like you guys are trying to size each other up a little bit each time, and then it's like, oh, maybe not, and like just trying to get a good grasp on the other person. And
Hmm.
I don't know if it's just because you both have like a background in psychology, or if it's that just seems it's really unique. And so, what does that look like from your side?
Yeah, I think we're probably both pretty intuitive people. Like, I can typically read people pretty quickly. I can be wrong, obviously. The issue is when you're a pretty intuitive person and you're right a lot, it becomes really hard not to just like unabashedly trust your intuition about somebody. Right. Whereas if somebody's like bad at intuiting, like pretty often, they tend to like, I think, make a little bit more space for their presumptions about another person, or their like essentially like their kind of like mental image of that person to be incorrect. So that's probably one weird dynamic, is that like we're probably both used to being the people that like are reading the other person, and kind of like presenting a bit of like a like kind of sitting back and like observing other people. And I think we it's a weird dynamic in that I think we're both constantly observing one another. um so that's probably one dynamic, right? Is like, I think, like when I engage with people, I'm constantly thinking, sorry.
I accidentally clicked the screen that your camera was on, so I said, "Oops, sorry about that."
No worries. I think I can talk for myself. When I talk to people, there's kind of this constant, it's not even intentional, it's just like, it's just how I think about people. There's this constant think where I'm essentially, I'm like drawing a picture in my head of who they are, but I'm also trying to more, I'm even more interested in what picture of me are they drawing, and how accurate it is it. And if it's incorrect, that actually helps me inform the picture that I draw about them, of being like, okay, well, they didn't read this correctly about me, that's really interesting, this might mean this or this, right? So you start like generating hypotheses about like, essentially like, who is this person? And I think highly intuitive people probably draw the picture more quickly, and they're often more correct more of the time. The problem is when you're wrong, it can be kind of like startling. So I think in our first interaction, right, I was just very brand new on the platform. His viewers and my viewers are like, you guys should talk, this would be amazing. And I was like, okay. So we like DM'd a little bit on Instagram, and he was like, do you want to talk about Dr. K? And I was like, I don't know who the fuck Dr. K is, but sure. So then I was like, give me like a little bit of time to prep. And like, I was basically like, is there anything specific you want to talk about? And at this point, when we had been DMing, I had started seeing some of his stuff about Dr. K. So it's like, after I said yes, I started like getting a build up, like, oh, okay, this is kind of how he thinks and feels about Dr. K. So then I spent like 20 hours going through, because he was like, yeah, I really want to talk about the relationship between Reckful and Dr. K. And I was like, okay, awesome. I started going through all of that content. And then we were like DMing more and more and building up towards it. And then he was like, I'm really angry about Dr. K. And then I started streaming before I talk a little bit about Dr. K as well. And he was like, I'm really mad at you about your perceptions of Dr. K. And I was like, okay, fair enough. And I had watched his content before. So I also had this like image of him that I recognized was like, I'm very aware that a streamer's image is not necessarily who they are. Basically, with everyone, except I didn't do this with Max. So most times, like if I'm going to talk to a streamer that I've seen on stream a fair bit, but I've never exchanged, I basically kind of am willing to go in with a blank slate and be like, I don't really care how you present online. I'm just going to talk to you and see how I feel about you. Pretty much I do that with every single streamer, because I know that oftentimes there's a level of farcity with streaming. Except I didn't do that with Max. I just like wholly bought into who he says he is in his content, because I was like, this guy's authentic. I really respect that. I said in our first conversation, I've come from like a long history of being like bullied and feeling like a need to mask myself. And so I really respect somebody who's kind of like unadulterated themselves, and just like honest about themselves and honest about how they feel about other people. And I was really into like the idea of like empathy as well, as he like talked about. I'm like, yeah, having empathy for people, just like being, having space for people to just like be where they are in the messy versions of themselves. It doesn't mean you're okay with it, you're just like, you're willing to exist in that space with them, is just really rare and is really really special. And so I just like really looked up to that. And then as we talked, I was like really shocked, and it was a really stressful conversation for me, actually. Like, I know I looked very calm because I was like regulating myself a ton, but like I was very stressed out because I was like, what the fuck is happening? Like, what is happening? Like, I know that we disagree on this, but like, how come he's not listening or hearing me in any way? And like, I thought he was intuitive, so why is he reading me so incorrectly? And then when I tell him what I actually am, why won't he give me any level of like listening? How come he can't have any measure of like empathy for me and like my perspective? Why is there no level of like essentially like humanity in this? So so I was really jarred. And after that first conversation, um, I actually like couldn't watch his content, like his live streams especially, for like probably 2 weeks. Like it made me feel sick to my stomach because it just like distressed me and startled me so much. Um, and then I kind of just like got over it and was just like, okay, like I guess Max maybe just isn't who I thought I was, or like maybe he's just got like way bigger feelings than I was expecting. But I kind of just like, I think I just like somewhat made peace, but I hadn't fully like processed through the shift in experience. Um, and then I saw him. I'm trying to think of our timeline. I saw him mention me again in the 2 hours of hate.
Yeah,
Trying to
you
think if there's
did.
anything in between.
Can
Yeah,
I
you
can I
did.
ask you a question about what you said
Yeah.
there?
Sorry, pause me at any time. Yeah,
Okay. I kind of have a hard time interrupting people because I'm from Michigan, which means I'm basically half Canadian. So I'm very
I'm a
polite.
streamer. I can talk
Um,
forever, so just interrupt me
s-
when you need me to pause. This is your
uh,
show, so whenever you need.
but well, the show is really about the people that I'm talking to. So when you said that you couldn't watch the live streams after a couple weeks, it sounds like to me what you were saying is that you had a really enjoyable perspective from watching all the things, and then you guys were
Mm.
talking, and then when it kind of flipped on its head, it sounds like to me that it was traumatic to have that kind of like reality crashing like interface with him.
I would say traumatic. Traumatic feels too strong, but it was for sure upsetting. It might even been like bordering into just. I have like a very fixed mind view of the stress spectrum, so I
Sure.
view it as like stressful, upsetting, distressing, and then like way back over here is traumatic. So I wouldn't call it traumatic. Like I don't have PTSD. I don't like wake up with night sweats about like Max or anything like that. Um, but it was for sure upsetting, and it caused like a fracture in being like, oh gosh, like when you're a really intuitive person, you're right almost all the time. And so when you're wrong, it's kind of mind fucking where you're like, what? Like what happened here? Which I know is like not the best humility to maintain. That's like probably part of the lesson in this is being like, just because you've intuited somebody and you think you're right, you could be wrong. And you gotta like make space for that. So I would say traumatized.
I correct. If we're using the word, I understand why I'm using the incorrect word there. I guess I guess what I should reframe it as it seems like it was a very like, impactful like negative experience that you wouldn't normally have if you were just wrong about like a person that you just met. It seems like you had like a really
Um,
big expectation and then
Yeah, I think I was just startled because it felt like I was so wrong. Yeah.
okay, were you already a fan of his at that point? Did you start
Hmm.
checking his stuff out?
Yeah, I had been checking his stuff out um, definitely before I talked to him. So I got introduced to Destiny. I'm trying to think. I feel like in like maybe September or so. And so
Oh,
around the time that, so about the time that, when did Destiny first talk to Max? It would have been around that time that I got introduced to his stuff and then started like going through his content.
okay. That makes sense.
November,
And then
I think is. Yeah.
how long was it before you talked to him about Dr. K? Was Dr. K was around late January, early February, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that makes sense. And I think that it's easy to think that you have a good grasp on who he is when you watch his content because like you said it's really
Sorry, I think your mic might be cutting out.
oh sorry yeah I tried to turn it down a little bit because my dog's going ham because she's
Oh, no
old and
worries.
crazy about everything that moves ever.
No worries. Your voice just dropped off at the end, so I didn't quite hear your question. You said, "Do you think that?" And then I didn't hear anything.
Oh, I think what I was saying there was that I think that it's really easy to feel really strongly about how you intuit him to be because of all his content is so like raw and honest that it's really easy to like be confident with how you're perceiving him more than like I think the average person
Mhm.
that you would run into. So I think that makes a lot of sense. That it would be. I think that if I had, if I like were to say interview him about him, which he has respectfully declined, and I kind of expected him to anyway. That if he was a lot different than I expected, I think that it would have maybe been pretty impactful to me as well. Um,
Yeah, I think it's not just that, like, because I don't think I had, like, I didn't go into it being like, I know who Max is, but I really believed him about his core values. Like, I really believed him, and I was really behind those core values. Like, I was like, this is really cool, it's unique, and I think the space needs it. So I think the issue is that when I left it, I was like, I don't know if those core values dictate his behavior as much as I was hoping that it was. Versus like I read who his personality is, if that makes sense.
yeah, I get that. Um, and then you were, I think you were in between the 2 hours of hate and something
Mm-hmm.
else.
Yeah. So then the 2 hours of hate came out, and he was talking about with a viewer about how basically the viewer felt that he was unfair to me and I feel like Brittany and Lauren probably, and then he dug. There's a couple of viewers that talked about a couple of different conversations, but the main one that I'm thinking of, they kind of dug into our conversation, and Max kept saying a bunch of things basically about what I had said. And the issue is that I hadn't said those things. I had distinctly not said those things, and I had clarified to him in that conversation that I wasn't meaning that. And so that was like, while the conversation with Max, I think, was distressing because I was just like, didn't expect that level of heat. It was probably like, I was only a month into streaming as well. So it was also just like, oh, like this is not the level of like anger I was expecting, I think, at all online, which probably shows a little bit of like naivety on my part. But then when I saw that, that was more so when my fracturing of being like, oh, fuck, I don't know. I don't know if he is what I thought he is as far as like values too. So that was kind of like the next step that broke, is like being like, I don't know why he would like lie about me to such an extent. Um, in that, like, I was just like, I didn't say that. He knows I didn't say that, and I don't know why he would be saying this. Because like authenticity is like kind of his thing, and it feels really weird to like really put words in my mouth. That by implication, like if I actually viewed things in the way that he says that I viewed things, like I would be kind of a piece of shit. But I was really like, the issue is that I actually view things a little bit opposite to what he was trying to claim. And so I was just like, why is this happening? I did DM him a bit about it. I won't go into details, obviously, about that. But we didn't obviously rectify it through there. So then we went into like the Destiny conversation, and that was like the next exchange that we've had.
Yeah,
And he had the 2 hours with Chad or whatever, talk about his feelings. I didn't watch much of that
oh,
though. Yeah.
um, the the thing that always occurs to me, and then when you were talking about how it doesn't seem like he's like living the values that he preaches, when certain things come up, and it usually, especially with Dr. K, to me that's one of the most humanizing elements that I see, is that when you see somebody who's being like unrealistically empathetic and like overwhelmingly raw all the time, to see them veer off and not be able to hold to those things because they're so like overwhelmed with emotion about something. And I don't know if that's the case or not, but I think that's how it looks to the viewer. I'm not making like the claim for him or
Mm-hmm.
defending that. That I always saw that as that, like, even though he can tell the most traumatic events from his life and not bat an eye and put it into like a nice like 20 to 30 minute piece, that he still has these like glaring issues dealing with certain things that are very like that kind of compromise you,
Mm-hmm.
like somebody who's like super nonviolent and then somebody brings up like their mother and they smack somebody in the face, or like, yeah, like that kind of a thing. So I don't know if that's at all is going on, but like when I talk to people, it seems like that's how it's viewed from the outside.
Yeah, potentially. And I mean, the reality is like, when you're talking about like a streamer's content, like everyone's going to have very complex reactions to it. Which is totally fine. Like I'm not going to be like, you're wrong for that being your perception of the content, right? The issue is like, that's just I think as somebody, so essentially like if it is this like raw thing that's like basically like you're kind of describing like a thorn in his side that like causes him to
Yeah.
maybe be unreasonable. It's hard to appreciate it when essentially like I'm a bit of the receiver of the disproportionate and inappropriate amount of like rage that isn't my fault and has nothing to do with me, right? I think
Yeah.
it's really fair to have like this boundary, and I think that's kind of where I got to. Is at first I like was like, okay, is this like because he has weird stuff? And after my first interaction with Max, I realized, you know what, I'm really going to make sure that I'm not trying to read him at all. Like when I'm not with him, I'm just going to fucking ask him directly. And if he's a very direct person, so that works. And so I was like, okay, well, obviously what I thought were his core values based on what he said may or may not have been true. They don't seem to be true, but I'd also like to like talk to him. That's why I wanted to have the conversation. And I wanted to have Dusty moderate because he's friends with both of us.
Mhm.
And I was hoping that basically when there is communication breakdowns that he would be able to catch it, because he's definitely better at noticing when Max is like maybe using a word in a way that other people might not receive. He like picks up on it, I think, better than I do. So that was the goal in having Destiny there as like the moderator. I know that Max probably doesn't feel quite the same about it now, which is super fair, but that was the original intention, at least on my part, with the 6 hour, 6.5 hour conversation.
I loved it. Yeah, Destiny said one of my favorite things in explaining Mr. Girl to other people. I don't remember who he was talking to. He might have been talking to you. It just really stands out. Whoever he was talking to, he said, "See, you're speaking English, and Max is speaking Mr. He either said Mr. Girl, Mr. Girlanese."
I don't think it was me, but
Okay,
maybe like a Britney conversation. I could see that
yeah,
coming up.
that might actually been it then, and that's something that I bring up a lot when I reference certain things. It seems like Max and somebody else can be like on the same side, but the other person won't be able to tell that's what he's saying because of the way that he expresses it. And
Hmm.
I feel like I pick up on that pretty easily because I think I'm prone to a lot of the same um, like levels of hyperbole when I'm upset. My wife, I've mentioned this a lot during these interviews. My wife tells me that I talk the way that he talks a lot, and I
Hmm.
think that I talk the way that my therapists in my life have told me that I should speak to people, except for when I get really upset. So I try to
Right.
be like overly direct, overly literal when I speak to people, and then when I get upset, I kind of fall into similar um, like traps of communicating.
Yeah.
And so
Um,
I thought it was a really good idea to have him moderate.
yeah. That was my goal. I know that he didn't feel that way because I think he felt like very 2v1, I think, in that conversation, which is unfortunate because that like genuinely wasn't, I think, either of our goal. Um, but I think we got stuck in this area where I think he does have a lot of like probably like weird hangups around psychology that kind of um, blur his ability to like interact with some of the data and information in as like a reasonable way as somebody else might. And I think that there's like understandable reasons for that. I'm just not willing to like be the verbal punching bag for that, essentially. Not that I think like he was actually like verbally punching me or anything like that, but
Sure.
it does feel like he was taking out some of his rage at all of this stuff on distinctly me, that felt disproportionate to what I was even saying, and it caused him to basically not ever see me. I don't think he really ever saw me in the conversation. And so I think once I like realized that he just wasn't seeing me, I think it just shifted for me because I actually like I can have a I think I just have a lot of like compassion for like a lot of people think that our relationship is ruined because of our conversation. I think it is infinitely better as a result of that conversation. I feel much more comfortable talking to him. I feel like um I feel like our communication in general has improved. I could be wrong, but I just it's moved me from before the conversation. I kind of was like bitter, being like, okay, like I think this guy's just like maybe a liar and like everything on his channel is maybe not true. I just didn't know. I was like, is that what's going on? And now I'm like, okay, I think I understand actually better what's going on. He's not lying necessarily. He's got like a thorn. And unfortunately, I kind of like stepped on that one area. Um, and it's people get to have thorns. And I also get to have boundaries of saying like, you can have these things, but you don't get to talk about me in such a way just because of it. Like that's just not fair.
Yeah.
And so I don't think like everything's fixed. Like anyone who's being like, are we BFFs now? Like we're definitely not BFFs now. Like we mostly have tension, but I feel like before I didn't see him fully, because probably a little bit of that, like maybe even like parasociality or something, where I just like had an image of him. I really trusted him on his word. And then something behaviors happened that made me be like, okay, things don't seem to be matching up. And I think I just have a better understanding of who he is. I hope. I could be fucking wrong though. I'm sure he's gonna watch this and be like, "This bitch, like, what an idiot." So we'll see.
Uh, well, I hope he watches this, but uh, I think that conversation, the whole video, I was unreal hyped the whole time. Like the first, let's say like 2 hours, I felt like really like uneasy and anxious because I didn't know how it was going to turn out because there was tension flying in every single direction. And every once in a while, I would get up and like tell my wife something, even though she doesn't really fucking care. But she's my wife. She's got to put up with me being
Just gotta
excited
hear
about
it.
things. Yeah, and um, like the whole thing was one of my favorite things I've ever seen in my whole life because well, first I gotta ask you, how did you pull off the switch that you had? Like you and Mr. Girl were fighting, like a lot,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you turned into, and I will characterize this way, and I don't care.
The
I don't care
couples
if anybody else has
counselors.
said. I don't care if who said it first. Like right as soon as it happened in that moment, I yelled it out loud. I beat everybody to it. Like. Yeah, you turned into a marriage counselor. I'm not saying couples counselor. You turned into a marriage counselor. And the thing that really got me is that they didn't even seem to notice because I can't accept that Destiny or Max wouldn't immediately say something if they noticed that. Like I feel like it would almost like it would say something about them if like you were able to just pull that on them and they notice. So like, and I also don't think that either of them are like that good of an actor to just play it off like they didn't. So and it led to one of the most open, honest human conversations I've ever seen on a live stream ever. Probably the most. They were using like I think and I feel statements, and it was super weird. Like I expect that coming from Max, but to see it coming from Destiny too, like it was beautiful. It was super humanizing, and it like really. I was so caught off guard, and it like fucked me up in the best way possible.
What do
And
you mean it fucked you up in the best way possible?
it was just so unexpected. I didn't. So it was almost like how Destiny's repeatedly told him, like, I feel like you think there's a part of me that you don't have access to, and that's just not the case. But when I'm watching, I was like, this seems like the thing that he wanted. Like this seems exactly like the kind of thing that Max has been talking about, and it was just they talk to each other like a therapist tells them to talk to each other. And I think I part of really got excited because like I really talk like that in my interpersonal relationships. I say I think statements, I say I feel statements, and I know I'm
Mm-hmm.
weird for it, but I feel like I have to be like honest or genuine, whatever I got going on in my head that makes me talk like that. I think it's good to do so, otherwise I wouldn't do it. And it was just like that doesn't happen on streams, and the way you were able to not just that you were able to do that, but you were able to go from I know you had to be going through a lot of stuff like during that. I was anxious watching it. So to take that and it's like you put aside that and then it was just like I'm about to just I'm a, I'm about to help some shit and they're not even gonna know that I'm doing it. And it worked and it was so good. And I think Twitch needs to see conversations like that where the people
Don't tell that to
watch
Mr. Grow.
the the conversations like you don't think that he thought that was good? I
I
guess
thought
I
it was
haven't really thought of
amazing.
that.
I thought it was amazing. This goes all the way back to like one of the core critiques is like, can you have emotionally exposed conversations? Um, I think it's amazing too, but like, how do you do that safely in a way that like protects every party? And
They don't know what's
can
happening.
somebody, yeah, like it's just this tricky thing of like, right, like we call it couples therapy, but it's like, to what extent? How much did I really do? I think is like probably part that we could argue, right? Probably each of the parties would feel varying levels of like what I actually did to facilitate that.
Sure.
Um,
I think the magic trick of switching it was the most important part. Just initiating that. I think at a certain point you could have stepped back and to some degree that did end up happening. You could just sort of step back and be like, my work here is done. I did the thing. It was almost like a perfect heist in a way. It's like, aha! I was actually the secret moderator the whole time, and I was moderating you guys to express your feelings to each other. Peace out, fuckers. And then you just like wave your hand and disappear, and just like the good thing happened. But it also, like, I kind of felt bad too, because like when you were exiting, uh, I don't think either of them were particularly nice to you, and I'm just like, I don't even know if they know what just happened.
I think so. In the 2 hours of us talking, um, it was really annoying. It was frustrating. But oh, I'm trying to figure out how to answer this.
You take your time.
Something in me switched, and it's very similar to what switched in me when I remember a similar switch in the past, which is like what led me onto the path of like I want to work long term. My goal is to get a specialization in forensic clinical psychology, for adolescents specifically. And this like started because I remember one year I was working. This is the year I was volunteering, and I was working like with more like some really rough kids. They were at risk teens, and there was this kid who was pretty violent, pretty notorious for never listening, and like just a fucking rat, like just a little rat. And I say rat in an endearing way. Rat in like our little like world is like it's a very loving term. Like when you call somebody a rat, it's kind of like you're like ruffling their head and like giving them a hug. So
I get it.
um, it's not,
It's like
if
little
anyone
shit.
hears that, they're going to think that that's a really negative nickname. It's just when you work with teens, you come up with the weirdest.
Yeah, I get it. It's
Teens
like
are weird.
when your kid's being a little shit.
Well, it's
I
it's
don't know
you, yeah. It's when they're
if
being a
that
shit,
translates.
but you love them anyways. Like as they're being a shit and like looking at you, knowing that they're like breaking the rules and giving you that cheeky grin. There's like rather than being mad, there's this party that just melts, and you're like, oh, you're such a fucking little brat, but I just love you. Like I just care about you so much. And I remember this working with this kid, and he was just such a fucking brat. Like every time I was like, "Hey, don't climb on the chicken coop. The roof is not super strong, and if you break it, it's going to cost a lot to repair it." And what happens the moment I turn away? The fucker's climbing on the chicken coop, right? Where I'm like, "Hey guys, just so you know, the hammocks they're super strong, but they can't support six of you." Unsurprisingly, I turn around, and what is this kid doing? He's collecting
Railing
all of
them.
his bros to go sit on the hammock and have six of them because I explicitly told him not to, right? Um, and this is why people hate working with oppositionally defiant teams, is because that's what they do. Um, and he was so frustrating, but I also like behind all of that behavior, I could like see this like broken person who just like desperately wanted to be loved and desperately wanted to be seen, and they wanted to push the rules a little bit, but they didn't want to be bad. Like they weren't bad, they just like had a little bit more edge to them, and they wanted to be seen and be okay for that. And I won't go into like all the details because it is a kid that I like worked with for like 6 years or whatever
Sure.
in a volunteer position, but still for the kid's privacy. But basically, like there were a couple of like moments where basically like um, I was just able to like have a more one-to-one conversation that like got pretty heavy, opened up about like just a lot of shit in their life, lots of abuse and stuff like that. I remember the kid just like breaking down and crying. And it was just that moment where like after that, no matter like what shitty bratty thing that this kid did and future kids, even though it's still annoying and inappropriate, I just like have this like weird almost like infinite grace and love for them because I just see somebody who's like desperately just like crying of like, can't somebody just see me and like let that be okay. And then when I was talking with Max and he was really caught up on like, can you guys just accept that I feel this way? And he was looping on this, and Destiny were like, yes, we accept that, we disagree with what you're saying. And he just like, it seemed like he couldn't understand that we fully accepted and understood that that was how we felt, but we also disagreed with how we like how he came to that conclusion and what drives those feelings. He disagreed with the fundamental premise, right? And he couldn't get there. He couldn't get that we could see him. Like the whole time he was just begging them, like he's like, just please see me, like please see me. And I just like heard that over and over. And I think just like something switched in me, and I just like it just like I think my like heart broke a little bit for him, and I was like, damn, like must be really sucky to be like 38 and still just like wishing people could see him. Like that sucks.
Yeah,
Um,
I imagine
like a lot. It does suck, and that doesn't make him being in, which is why I was still like firm on like what he gets to talk about and like how he's treating Destiny. Like I wasn't nice to him, like overly nice to him after that. Like there were still like I was firm on it, but I think it just like gave me, I don't know, just a soft spot for him. I was like, man, it just sucks to not be seen. And he's all of his art, like the part that I think appealed to me so much is he's really trying to see people and see things. And I think he can't see it with sight. Like he's got too much of a thorn. Like he's not seeing it, but I get why. And um I think he genuinely wants to do good in this world. And there's not a lot of people who are like willing to break themselves to continue to try to do good in this world. And I think he's going down, like I think how he's trying to do good right now isn't quite correct, but like man, you got to appreciate somebody who's like still desperately trying to do good even if it's not actually helpful. Like there's just something to that. They're like literally trying to give others what they like can't get themselves, and that's sad. And I can't give it to Max necessarily, but I think when we transition to like talking about Destiny, um, when I saw that like need to be seen was there, I was like, it's probably going to be more helpful if the person he cares about in this conversation sees him a little bit. And I think Destiny does see him and is willing to see him. He just doesn't always like say it. So that was part of the transition. I was like, Max and I aren't going to go anywhere. Like, there's nowhere that this is going to go. But I think I've at least cleared the air about like what is true and not true about me at like a public level. So yeah, I think it felt like that was the natural like direction that the conversation needed to go. So I just kind of followed that. I feel like I asked a couple of prompting questions. I think I like summarized once or twice to kind of like help bridge the gap between them. But like honestly, I was there for like 2 hours and barely said anything toward the end. Like I was just like chilling. So yeah.
Yeah. Um, do you mind if I take like 30 seconds? My wife came home and I just want to
Mm-hmm.
say hi and like kiss her and hug her and not make her feel like I'm being cold because I'm streaming.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Hello, chat. Is my audio and visual really off? Because if it is, it's because I'm streaming my Discord camera, which might make the ping just terrible. So if it is, I can swap to just my direct camera. I think. Thank you. I understand your perspective so much better. You're welcome. Too bad there's not more of you here to see my perspective. That's okay. Maybe it'll get out. Maybe it won't. That's okay.
Thank you.
No worries.
I always feel bad when I'm streaming when she comes home, so I thought I needed to make a better effort to let her know.
Okay.
See, you actually kind of inadvertently answered a couple of my things that I got here. But also, just I want to reiterate again, thank you for that the stream that you guys did together. It was like almost inspiring to just think that that real interpersonal conversations can happen, and also to be the one that kind of like it almost seems like that you could be seen as taking a dive by like, backing off and then like trying to help after all that tension. So I think that it I want to say like it kind of made to me seeing it going on like it's like she's kind of the shit right now. She's just like really well, I don't know if that expression I don't know how many things I keep finding out things from Michigan like other people don't say. So
Mm.
that I take for granted. You just seem super cool in that, and because it seems like you took a risk of being seeing like you're just gonna like take an L or something. But it just seems like you did a really cool thing, and I loved what it turned into, and I thought that stream was like in. I thought it was important for me to see because I didn't think
Mm.
things like that could happen in a public space.
Mm. Yeah, I appreciate that. I imagine some people are gonna feel wholly opposite. Like I'm aware as I'm saying this, I'm like, oh, like I am buckling up for people coming in and being like, see, this is I've had so many like random people DMing me being like, you're just like a controlling blah blah blah. And they're gonna like take this as evidence that like I controlled it and like I'm trying to save Max. And it's like I'm not trying to save Max, obviously. But I don't know. I think
I,
when we stream and when you like, this is something I've noticed in a lot of stream conversations is that we forget that there's just like two humans talking, and there's like, there can be a lot of power of just like following where like people want to go. Um, and I think it's interesting. I think this is what Dr. K originally just wanted to do. It just got really messy, and he probably didn't think enough about like certain boundaries that were really important. It feels like Dr. K is probably somebody who like cares a lot, and because of that, isn't always good at boundaries and knowing like which lines to make clear. Um, Whereas I'm really big into boundaries actually. Um, but like humans just like connecting. It's really sad to me to know how cathartic that is. It's really sad to me, for example, for people to like watch like when I like have had like deeper conversations on stream with just somebody else. It's not at all therapy. We're both just talking about ourselves. I don't give them advice at the end. I don't tell them how to fix themselves. We just talk. We just like connect as humans. It's sad to me as well to see how many people reach out and they're like, holy shit, that was so cathartic. Because I'm like, this is what connection's supposed to look like. Like, this is what human connection's supposed to look like. It's messy, it's ugly, it takes a lot of work, but it's like two people honestly showing up and just like wrestling through their shit. Like, that's what connection should and can be. But for whatever reason, we don't get it a lot.
yeah, I think I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think those things are really important to me. So it what you just said really resonates. I get that.
Mm.
Let's see. So do you do you think that also I think I'm not going to say anything about what I think or feel about Dr. K at all because I don't know if I how I can do that without like inadvertently like defending Mr. Girl
Mm.
or seeing like I don't know. I think that I'll just keep all of my personal comments to myself about it. I think it's a bad idea for me to say anything. I don't want you to think that I was like ignoring anything you say about that. I just think it's bad for me to. I think knowing that, or sorry, but I think there, knowing that you guys both have like, a background in, or sorry, an education in psychology, does it create like a weird area where it's hard to tell if like when you guys have strong disagreements, if it's like an academic disagreement or if it's a personal disagreement? Because like you were saying too, like it is just two people interacting with each other, and I think it's hard to maybe when you have a lot of people watching you, and I don't know how that interacts with that part. Like I think that there's a pretty big difference when I'm talking to somebody about something that I've looked into a lot,
Mm.
but like if I have any kind of relationship with them, it kind of makes it hard for me to suss out like what am I actually like fighting for in this conversation. Is it hard to kind of distinguish that, or how do you think that it's on one side more than the other when it involves things like Dr. K, or if you guys touch on anything involving psychology, does it uh, does it lean
I,
one way or another?
It feels to me like I have more of an intellectual disagreement, an academic, and for him, it feels like a lot more of like a personal and moral disagreement. Um, but it's probably a mixture, a little bit of both. I don't have a lot of feelings wrapped up in Dr. K. Like I said, I had never even heard of him until Max suggested him. I don't care one way or another. I don't really watch his streams. Um, and so, especially the first one for me, I was definitely approaching it at a much more intellectual level. And then it also became kind of interpersonal and moral as well, which is, I think, part of what like startled me is I wasn't expecting it to become that specifically. Um, yeah, so that's hard to answer. It's probably a bit
Sure.
of both, and I imagine I'm gonna feel one way and he might feel the other, or we might both agree. I'm not sure, but I view it as both academic and kind of interpersonal, and then also moral. Feels like there was three things going on at least.
Okay, I think that makes sense.
Mm.
What do you think it and I'm sure we've touched on this a couple of times. Why do you think it's super hard to pin down what he thinks or feels about things that he's talking about? Because I think, especially when a lot of people think that it's an act, or a lot of people say like he doesn't really think this. Like I feel like there's some kind of quality about him that makes it really hard for people to feel confident when they're like pinning down what he really means or says.
Mm. Could you give me an example of that?
Um, Let me think. I think the real doll, all the things surrounding the real doll, when he tried to explain why he behaved in the way that he did and why he said the things that he did, a lot of people accused him of essentially wanting to hurt her into submission into giving him what he wants. Or a lot of people would, there was just like a lot of claims about what his intentions were and like people trying to figure out like, well, what did he mean when he said this? And I know it happens to some degree when
Mm-hmm.
uh, any streamer does anything that's bigger. And this was probably one of the things that he kind of did on his own that shook like Twitch and YouTube, like this whole space kind of like turned and looked directly at it and was like, everybody has to talk about this right now. Like that and the Dr. K thing just sort of like grabbed the entire like social commentary politics space and
Mm-hmm.
like, get over here right now. This is all that matters for like the next week or so.
Yeah.
And it, a lot of times when this sort of thing happens, it seems like there's a pretty big agreement, like outside of Mr. Girl, seems like there's a pretty large agreement as to what happened, and then it's like, what are the implications of this? How do we deal with the society? But on these things, a lot of it seemed to be focused on what is he actually saying? What is he actually doing? Like there seemed to be a lot of disagreement about that. So it's kind of an interesting thing for me to think about. Like why? Like what about him makes it really hard for people to pin down what's really happening?
Uh,
Do you think?
Probably in part because he doesn't play with social niceties like at all. Like he kind of just wholly rejects it. To probably an unreasonable degree. I would agree with a lot of Destiny's critiques of like his communication with people. In that like he's just not really willing to play ball in the way that we kind of socialize people in North America too. He doesn't do a lot of rapport building. So I think most streamers are aware that, and this is why authentic conversations are really hard to get on stream, because a lot of people point out there's an audience. And so some people say there's no way you can have an authentic conversation with an audience. I don't think that's true. I just think it's significantly more difficult. And both streamers have to kind of be willing to ignore the audience a little bit and also like lean into vulnerability. And also like not everyone's as willing to be as vulnerable on stream, which is super fair, by the way. So there's kind of this like a lot of streamers when you talk to them, like pretty much everyone when you talk to them, you need to build up some level of rapport before you say like I also am one for like being really glib. I've got like a decently dark humor, but I like typically build up rapport a little bit before I like hit people with like the really dark jokes and stuff like that, because
Sure.
people don't know how to read you. And a lot of times people kind of think in stereotypes and heuristics. So if you sound like this thing and this thing belongs to X category and they don't know you to not be X category, they'll just kind of lump you into it and then they'll kind of like dismiss you. I think streamers have an extra level of that not only are they being human and just stereotyping and using heuristics, but they're on top of that um, trained by the necessary element of like the backstabbery, the content gouging, the intentional like trying to catch one another slipping, that there's this extra level of like distrust that they're gonna have. And so when like Max is kind of like being like, I'm just going mask, like fully mask off. A lot of them I think are like, I don't know if he's actually mask off or if he's LARPing. Is this a character? Right? Because sometimes when you talk to streamers, you pretty quickly catch on and being like, oh, this is like wholly a character. Like this is mostly a character who fucking knows what they believe. And then other times you're like, it seems like half and half. And so you're gauging that. So like, I think when Max hits you, it like feels almost like being like, is this a character? Is this just a really mentally unwell person? Like, what the fuck is going on? He says things in a really provocative way. I think intentionally. I'm gonna be honest. I know he says like fully like just how he feels. I think there's this thing where he'll ask questions in a provocative way that causes the person to get like shocked, and I think he's actually trying to shock them a little bit into authenticity. Like when people get shocked and thrown, they'll often like be a little bit mask off for a second because they don't quite know how to respond. But because they're doing that, he does that sometimes. I think some people read that as goading. They're not really sure. And then he's not the most internally consistent human at like a pure like logic basis, right? Like he doesn't have a really
Sure.
clear moral framework that he operates from. It seems to not be consistently applied across topics, and so you don't really know where he's going to fall on various topics, and you don't have any level of like framework to compare him back to interpret, to like figure out how to interpret statements that are ambiguous and you're not sure how to read. I think there's like a mixture of a lot of these things. And then he also has Max isms where like certain words mean something to him that they broadly don't mean to others, without a lot of explanation. It's like very similar to like everyone knows this of like Jordan Peterson when he says the word chaos, he doesn't mean it in a way that anyone else uses the word chaos, and he never
Sure.
explains it. So you're always like, why are you talking about chaos all the time? Like, relax, my
Yeah. Um. Yeah. Do you ever watch the Hotline, like Mr. Girl Hotline?
dude. No, I
Oh,
really don't love most of his interviews. I find that yeah, I have a hard time watching him engaging with other people a lot of the time.
well, I was on the Hotline once, and I was actually on Advice and Confessions 2 times. But on the
Hmm.
Hotline, my main goal was to find out. I wanted to ask him what his moral framework system, like, what do you operate off of? And his answer was as much of a non-answer as an answer. And I guess I kind of expected that, and that was when I first brought to his attention I wanted to make a video, but it's kind of shifted what I wanted to make the video on about him to this now. But it almost seemed like I felt like I almost offended him by asking what is the basis for your values, and I think we landed on like life, liberty, and the USA. Like it seemed like what he was just saying is like I pretty much just believe what I believe from how I was raised, and like the ideas of what means to like be an American. Like I have American values. I grew up in America. Like I was raised by my family. I have those values, and I was raised in America, and I have those values, which to be fair aren't super consistent
Mhm.
internally in and of themselves. So yeah, I think that makes sense, and I think you're giving me a lot of really good things that I'm looking for. I had a feeling that you'd be able to give me a lot of different perspective, but kind of I think I'm getting a lot of different ideas to consider than I have from most people that I've talked to about Mr. Girl. So it was kind of hopeful about when even when I'm not going to mention anything that we talked about really, other than the fact that a couple of the questions that I pretty much ask everybody, I gave you ahead of time just to kind of give you a feel.
Yeah.
But I definitely get the sense that when you talk about Max, that it has some degree of weight for you. So I kind of had the hope that you would have a perspective that would come from holding some weight on a subject.
Weight is in like there's like an emotional buy-in for me, or
No,
what do you mean
no,
by
like
weight?
like it has some level of importance that you think that like what we're talking about is valuable.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, watching Max talk with other people, now that I've kind of like, I feel like I'm like, okay, I think I know what's going on, which in fairness, I could be wrong. Like, I could be wrong. Um, but if nothing else, my conception of him that has shifted has allowed me to have like an immense amount of compassion for him. Um, is he basically always expects the highest level of charitability from people talking to him, and he doesn't give them any cues that he's giving it back, and then at some point he switches and doesn't give it back, in fact is sometimes really bad faith with them, especially if they say something that he especially if he reads them incorrectly, he'll kind of stick to what he intuits about them no matter what, um, and just keep trying to like shove them into the he's weird, right? Because most people get stereotypes of other people that are like pretty common, right? So when I talk to conservatives, they always just think I'm a really intense leftist woman who screeches about feminism and hates men. And then everything I say, they kind of try to shove into that box, and they're like, oh, you're just saying that. When you say like there's an issue with like toxic masculinity, you're saying it a way that every radical feminist does. And it's like, I'm not. If you actually listen to my sentence, I'm explicitly not saying that, but they can't hear me. Max is weird because he does kind of a similar thing, but it's not these stereotypes that we're all used to. It's like his own self, like whatever he's kind of created his mental image of, and then he kind of like shoves you into that. And so I think it's really weird because I think most people in streaming world are very used to being shoved into like stereotypical boxes. Oh, you're just a liberal. That must like, right. Like when I talk to lefties, they're like, oh, you're a liberal NIMBY who like says very little, doesn't live out her values, and just always talks about voting, right? And then I'm like, well, actually, like I volunteered for 11 years. Like I'm very clear about what I do and don't care about. That doesn't really match me super well. I'm very sympathetic to certain progressive concerns. Um, and then Max is really throwing because he doesn't stick you into stereotypical boxes. He puts you in Max created boxes, and it takes you a while to like press on the edges and be like, wait, what is this? Like, what am I in? When you're, because a lot of times when you're interlocuting, you can very quickly be like, oh, okay, I know what box they're putting in. Like you can feel it, right? Whereas with
Right.
Max, you're like, this is not what I'm used to, and um, he's taking some of this at face value that most people don't. But then I say this, and most people are okay with this, and he's taking it in like the worst way possible. And then if he gets kind of too stuck on like what image he's made of you, he only engages in his vision of who you are. It doesn't matter who you are at that point. And there's pretty much nothing you can do to break him out of it, right? This is why I said he was bad faith with me, not because he was actively lying, which I thought he might have been lying. He's deceived himself so much about who I am that he can't see me anymore. I don't exist anymore.
Yeah. So I didn't originally plan on bringing this up, but I kind of have like a theory about what's going on in those moments, and I don't think it's much of a secret to say that I'm a really big Mr. Girl fan. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
YouTube mod, so I'm there for damn near every stream. If not, I watch it afterwards. I haven't watched all the main channel content because I don't want it to run out. I have this weird anxiety about not having any to watch if I really like something. I still haven't watched the season finale of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, okay? I've watched
Because
everything but it, because
you
then it'll be
can't let
over.
that end. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't tried to fight the last boss in Elden Ring because I don't want it to be over. I'm weird like that. But
Mm.
so I kind of noticed, it seems to me that when when he brings up subjects that he's really, really strongly convinced about, it seems like they're coming from a time when he didn't fully understand something, and then once it clicked and he got an understanding that fit the situation involving what's being talked about, it was like I always imagine that he had some big realization, like, oh, I was wrong about this before and now I get it. And so like that's just how this thing always has to be, because when you have like a big brain moment and something becomes clear, it helps shape how you view those things in the future. But it seems like that's getting taken to the next level, to where now this is like the gold standard, that anything that resembles this thing must be like this now because I'm not going to be fooled again kind of mentality.
Mm.
That's how it always seems to me. And this I have never talked to him about anything that wasn't just like me coming with a thing that I wanted to say. I'm just a really big fan, and I tend to overanalyze things and think about things a lot. But that's how it's always struck me, because I could see myself falling into a trap like that, like pretty easily, I think. And I think I probably have before and had to work hard to like work myself out of those.
Mm.
um, I don't know if you think that there's any merit to that, but whenever I see those things happening, I relate it back to when I hear him talking about how a thing happened and how he figured it out, and it seems like it holds pace with those things when they come up again.
I think let me try summarizing what I think I heard you say before I
Okay,
comment on it, because I'm not sure I'm fully understanding you.
sure.
It feels like what you're saying is um, when you've watched his content and engaged with him and talked with him and watched him wrestle with ideas or with other people, if what you see is him like wrestling and wrestling and wrestling until like he has like almost a light bulb moment, and then he kind of like has a moment of clarity. He seems to understand what's going on, and then he kind of chucks forward with that moment of clarity. And typically the moment of clarity is pretty on board with what you would agree is going on. Is that, am I understanding you correctly? Is that way off?
So I think you get the most part. So what I'm saying is like he'll tell a story about when he like didn't understand something and then it clicked for him like somewhere prior in his life. And then whether it's a conversation that he had in the past or it's a conversation he has moving forward, whenever something involving the thing that he talks about happens, it seems like he's going to hold it to that standard. Like it's going to have to fit in that same box that he put his new understanding of the subject in.
Okay. Interesting. I haven't really thought of that. So I'm not sure how to test your hypothesis against like my conception of him.
Sure.
Um Mostly because I actually don't think I've seen him wrestle much with ideas except for with me specifically, because I wouldn't say like I've watched his content chronologically. I don't watch almost any of his interviews, so I don't get to see his like process of wrestling too much other than when I've been like personally exposed to it. And I don't love the way he thinks. It's not a way that I would advocate. It's like, this is how you think well about things. Like I don't like, I have a lot of compassion for Next, but I don't agree with how he thinks. So I don't know if I can see it in the light that you're seeing it.
Sure.
Um, but that might just be a bias because of like anytime him and I have wrestled on ideas, he's been like, I would say like particularly bad faith with me. Um, and I would obviously, in my view, he's also come to like the really incorrect conclusions. He does really hold rigidly to stuff that he does come to a conclusion about, right? Like, um, one of my chatters might say he lacks a lot of epistemic humility, which I think, in fairness, lots of people lack epistemic humility, but he's really interesting in that most people lack epistemic humility around like ideas, like certain political views and stuff like that. And he actually is pretty willing to like suspend his belief and like explore ideas and shift and change them from the most part that I've seen. But he has no epistemic humility with interpersonal stuff, like how he thinks about other people, his perceptions of other people, um, his perceptions of like certain like world experiences and stuff, which is very interesting to me, because I hold a lot of that. Because mostly, yeah, but I could be projecting at this point. I'm not sure. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I kind of got the idea of it when he talked about he I think maybe I either seen it a couple days ago or it was from something he did a couple days ago. He got a massage from a woman, and she said that there's not going to be anything sexual, and then it was like clearly like she was trying to make it something sexual, and he was like, no, it's cool, don't worry about it, that's fine, it's not a big deal. And then afterwards he realized, oh, she was like, even though we said it ahead of time, like she was actually trying to do something sexual during this. And I feel like if he was ever in a situation where somebody said something ahead of time, he might be like super prone to thinking like, all right, something's going to happen for sure now because they said that. Like anything that could possibly be interpreted as like making a move, that's definitely what it's going to be because I was so wrong before and I realized it. Like that's the framing that this whole situation's going to be under now. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay, that does make sense. Yes,
That's
I would
that's what I think
say
happens.
yes, and that's very akin to how people with like pretty dysfunctional childhood like lives can experience the world. The issue is that it typically isn't a functional way of viewing the world, right? There's a lot of things
Yeah.
about like how he views the world. This is why I'm saying like I have a lot of compassion for Max. There's not a ton I agree with him on, to be honest. There's very little actually that I agree with him on, other than like some of the stuff around like his talk conversations around pedophilia and um, trying to think if there's other, and not important, not what you're asking about, but
You're
yeah,
good.
the way he thinks is reminds me a lot of things that at least in most like therapeutic sessions, for example, we would probably look at and say like this is not predictive of good functionality, and it's not the best way to see the world. Like it's a very reactive, very like kind of fear-based reaction, like, oh, this thing was really negative. So now all things that look similar to that, I'm just going to generalize onto it, which is like very classic of like how stress, distress, and whatnot can like impact the way you view the world. The problem is that like it's not very true a lot of the time. And so when you like have one bad experience with one person and then you put that on every other person now whoever looks at all similar to that person, you're going to be wrong a lot, like a
It's like
lot
the
of the time.
person. It's like the person who just starts being racist because they got jumped by a black guy once, and now they're just racist towards all black people, and
Yep.
think that they're gonna get jumped all the time. Yeah, um,
It's
I think
superhuman. It's
yeah,
superhuman, right? It's just sometimes it feels like I see not even Max, I see a lot of his viewers defending that like style of thinking, and I'm like, this is not healthy. Like this is not what I would say is a healthy way of thinking. I don't think it leads to better outcomes for Max overall. Would be kind of my view of it.
yeah. I feel like if when you defend that kind of thing, what you're probably trying to do is defend the fact that you do that, and it feels really natural to have those kinds of reactions if you have them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, oh,
It's
why wouldn't
super
he?
super natural. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Um, do you would you say that you think that he's doing a good thing overall, aside from what we just talked about? I'm not
Um,
saying that.
Depends on what his goals are because I no longer fully believe what his stated goals, and I don't know what his goals are with his streaming
Well, I
are
guess,
now.
do you think that um that the outcomes of what he's putting out into the world is having a positive effect?
Not right now. No.
Okay. Uh, do you think that his content helps people?
Um, there's probably a lot of validation that his content gives certain people, and that can be helpful. But if people don't move forward from the validation, then we get into like pretty dangerous territory. So um, it's hard to comment. You're also asking me to like predict and evaluate content that I don't honestly watch a lot of his interviews. I don't spend time in his
Sure.
community. So I'm not the best measure of this at all. Like, yeah, it's going to be like the reality is like, I don't feel that way. That
Okay.
also means nothing, like literally nothing. So I wouldn't hang my hat on that.
Sure. I guess just having you saying that, because I never really know to what degree people engage with his content. One of the reasons why I'm so energized to do the project that I'm on, and I think I became a much bigger fan, is the first time I called into the Advice and Confessions, he told me the same thing that he tells everybody. Have you watched it enough to know what he tells like every single person?
Uh, no, I started watching the first one. Made me kind of uncomfortable, so then I got out of there. I
I
also
told
just don't watch streams in general. I don't have time these days.
That's fair. I went on and I told him two stories about things that I had trouble with, and at the end of it, he told me that he thought that I should go to therapy, and I knew I
Hmm.
needed to go to therapy already, but hearing that from somebody that like really like the content of, especially like the way that he explains things, and thought he had a pretty decent perspective, I did go to therapy, and then from there I went to see a psychiatrist, and I got on meds, and like my life is like objectively better. Like my wife said, it's the best thing that's ever happened for our marriage. I feel good about a bunch of stuff. I called in but the second time I called in, I my like preamble to it was like, just so you know, I was on here before, and he told me to go get therapy. Within 2 weeks, I did, and I'm doing a lot better. And so I don't know if he said it or it was somebody in chat said like this is the first advice and confessions like success story. And I didn't think that he gave me any kind of therapy. I think that he did a good job of listening to what I had to say in a way that made me receptive to hearing that I needed to go to therapy, despite him telling everybody that he needed to.
Hmm.
So I'm always interested to see if people think that he's helping people, because I don't know if I'm the only person that had a really good outcome from it or not.
Right.
And that's something I think that I'll probably get a lot more from talking to people that consume a lot of his content. Because right now I'm
Hmm.
doing a lot of interviews with streamers, people that have interacted with him and helped like move his career along to help paint that story for me.
Hmm.
So but it is always interesting to see the people that interact with him and have like really strong opinions about him. If they what they think about that, or to what degree they consider like the good or the bad. Because I think a lot of the general like commentary about him is should we even be platforming him comes up a lot. Is he really doing
Right.
anything good? Is there any value here? And I think when you're on the content creator side, it's a lot harder to see the things that the fans see and why that they are fans to see the good that we think is happening.
Uh-huh. And there's also I hate the platforming. I think most people when they talk about platforming are just like when I listen to it, it's just insane to me. Like I'm just like, hold on. Like first of all, uh, like what do you mean? No, no, I don't know. I'm not going to get into that actually because it's a
I get
whole
it.
other
The whole thing
conversation.
is crazy.
I would just like you or you're never gonna hear me. It doesn't matter like what my relationship is. I'm probably never gonna advocate that we like deplatform Max unless basically the only time I ever encourage people like probably it might be helpful to like start reporting their stuff is when it's really obvious that they're engaging in like constant regular self-harm by streaming. That would be the only time where I'm
Oh,
like, it might be worth starting to report them. But at that point, it's not because I'm like, let's deplatform them because their ideas are too dangerous. I'm like, let's deplatform them because holy fuck, I don't know if they're ever going to stop, right? And so like,
sure.
and that's a pretty extreme case, right? And like, I'm very much of like, I don't think everyone should do this. I just think like, if you feel uncomfortable with how this person streams, seems like pretty obvious. Like I've had a bunch of people be like, how do you feel about train wrecks? And I'm like, well, if you feel uncomfortable with it, if you feel like it's like watching somebody engage in like self-harm and addiction, I would report it if you want to. But
I think that's probably pretty radical because I would say that I think if I seen people consistently advocating for like violence against particular groups or something like that, I think that's kind of scary, and I might lean towards that. Like if they're like actively like, hey, we need to do like X terrible thing to Republicans, and that's like their whole platform,
yeah,
that might
hate
freak me
speech.
out. Well,
Yeah, I
not
would.
hate
So
speech, like actually rallying people. Like we need
that is
to.
hate speech. Hate speech is considered like rallying people to do violence. It's a criminal offense. So in that case,
Okay,
I would say please report them to the police.
okay,
Absolutely. Right? When we're talking about
okay,
hate speech, follow the proper procedures that we have for hate speech.
okay. Then maybe you weren't being as radical with your statement as I thought you were. Then okay, okay.
Yeah. Like
Because that's
I'm not a radical free speecher. Like I'm like if somebody's like inciting violence, report them to the police. Like absolutely. If you like are in a Discord and people seem like they're like leading up towards like mass shooting,
yeah,
try to
yeah,
report them to the police. That's a really good idea. But that to me is very different than deplatforming. And deplatforming feels like almost exclusively we don't like these ideas and we don't want to wrestle with them in the social court. And I'm dubious about the efficacy of that essentially.
well, that I'm really glad that I said what I said to clarify. Because yeah, okay, I think we're probably on the same page with that then. What do you think that people misunderstand about Max the most? Like it could be positive or negative.
Mm-hmm. Well, most people don't approach him. Most people don't approach any online content with any level of charitability, which is fine. You don't actually have to. But because he's avant-garde, um, and I don't know, in my mind, that's really obvious that he's avant-garde. You have to, in my view, approach like really avant-garde art um, with a level of like separation, and I try to give it like as much best faith as possible. Um, and then I kind of see like the effects and how their like art changes and like what their future art is and being like, is this something to give a benefit of the doubt to, or like what are they really meaning here? And like trying to actually like complexly understand what's like good best faith interpretation, what's like not good faith or bad faith interpretation, what's the bad faith, and like the truth is probably somewhere in the middle there. And so I think most people, because he's a little edgy, they just like use their heuristics and they're like, oh, he sounds like somebody who loves pedophiles because he's talking about empathy for pedophiles. You know, stereotype. He supports pedophiles. He's a bad person. No good faith offered. He's an immoral human. No good faith offered to anyone who's immoral. In fact, bad faith. Interpret everything he says in the worst way possible. So I think that's a lot of what happens. People engage with him in pretty bad faith, and then when he actually talks to them, he doesn't do the steps necessary to like cue people that they might not need to be as bad faith with you, which again, just because you cue people doesn't mean that they're always going to be good faith with you or even
Sure.
just not bad faith. But he really isn't willing to do that like rapport building, which is going to be the main thing. So most of the misunderstandings are because of avant-garde edginess and also not willing to play tit for tat at all.
Yeah, I say this a lot, especially when I'm talking to people on this question. I So when I first started listening to his content, I listened a lot in the car and I drove a lot, and my wife and kid would be in the car. And my wife asked me, she's like, why are you listening to this guy? Because I think it was right around like when you talk to book smarts, and that one got pretty heavy into the pedophile conversations. And I was like, well, see, if you listen to like half of what he's saying, and sometimes up to like 95% of what he's saying, it sounds really, really bad. But if you hear the whole thing, he always has a way to like bring it back around and tie it together. So if you're just catching
Usually.
bits and pieces, yeah. So if you catch little bits and pieces, I don't think that it's gonna paint the picture. He's a big picture talker.
For the most part. I mean, he's a little weird, like when you get into his trans stuff, right? He says he's a gender abolitionist,
Hmm.
but he's not. He's a sex determinist. He just says gender abolitionist because he doesn't want people to use the word gender anymore,
I
which is like really funny. Um, there's a couple of things again where he like uses words in a way that it doesn't mean, maybe because he doesn't know that like when you say, right, if you say I'm a gender abolitionist, most people prescribe a number of sets of beliefs to that, and he
sure.
doesn't hold any of those.
Yeah, but if you take
Which
the
is
word
like
gender and
confusing.
abolition, it
Yes.
works. It needs to be like a
Yeah.
hyphen in there because I'm a gender abolitionist for the most part. I think I have a couple reserves that kind of conflict, but for the most part, I think I lean towards that way of thinking. And some of the things he says, like, well, it seems like sex matters a lot to you too, and how people should behave and things like that. So that doesn't really fit how I feel about it. And somebody I know actually went on to the hotline and said, I
Mhm.
just wanted to come on here and say that I think you're a fake gender abolitionist.
He is like I get that you're being like, yeah, but the label implies this, and I'm like, yeah, but nobody. That's literally not what the movement is. So like, I
Hmm.
don't know why you would like it's. And here's the thing: you can steal that label and apply it to you to like poke fun at the movement itself. Like, there's a level of irony, but then you can't be shocked when people misinterpret and are somewhat don't understand what you're saying and assume certain things about your position that you don't hold. Like, you can't be like, whoa, what's this weird that like I said that I was a deep progressive, and then when people ask me about my ideas, it turns out that I'm economically in every way very, very conservative. And they're like, what do you mean you're progressive? You're not for the welfare state at all. And you're like, yeah, but I'm progressive and because I want to see our debt reduced. And you're like, what the fuck, dude? Like, why would you do like why? So he does it does some stuff like that every now and then where you're just like, why? But
Like I can see how you got there, but I can see why you're saying what you're saying, but I think that it's still wrong.
what I'm saying about like his
No,
views.
no, I was trying to steel man what you were saying. Is that like
Oh,
if you're talking to him about the like I can see what you're saying. I can see why you're choosing those words, but I still think you shouldn't be using those words.
it's just you can't hold up. He absolutely can, but then you can't be shocked when people can
Sure.
engage in good faith with you.
Well, that's why I said
That's the gap I would
shouldn't.
say. Yeah,
Because
and
like you understand the aim.
this is the issue with artists that I have a lot of times though. Is I'm like, you can do art, you can be avant-garde, but then you can't be shocked when people have a reaction to it, and you can't just be like, what the heck? Why do you have this reaction? And it's like, you know why you're being edgy, like you're pushing the frontiers of art, like there's going to be a reaction, and it's just funny, right? It's like it's a similar thing I run into conservatives a lot when they're like super rude and mean, and then they get like shocked when people are like kind of caustic back to them, and they're like, what the heck? I was just
Yeah.
being honest, dude. And I'm like, yeah, but if you're honest and kind of an asshole, people aren't going to like you. And again, you can be honest and be an asshole, but you don't get to be shocked when people don't like you for that, right? Like, that's the
Yeah.
gap. Like, this is why I say, like, I know that I'm mean sometimes. I just take responsibility knowing, like, I'm going to ruffle feathers. Some people are going to hate me. That is par for the course because I know that I'm mean sometimes. Like, I get like pretty hard on people for certain things. And that's fair. You're allowed to feel that way about me, but
It,
don't hide for the responsibility of your words. It's just kind of my view. But I
yeah,
have this
it's
whole thing with artists. I fight with artists about this all the time.
yeah, I'm a big on like you should know your audience. You should understand what people are going to hear when you say what you're saying. So like if you have like a funny joke that might be like targeting a certain kind of people, maybe you don't tell that joke to those people, and not expect them to get mad at you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it just seems like I understand what you're saying. If you're saying gender abolition, then maybe don't say it to an audience that might have a bunch of people that understand the term or like are for that, and say like you're not representing what we're saying.
Yeah, well, again, you can just know that that is going to be the reaction,
Sure.
and
Sorry.
don't be surprised when that's the reaction. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
When I say shouldn't, I mean if you don't want the pushback from it, then you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm almost out of questions here. Oh yeah. When it comes to his Dr. K, like the campaign for him to like get Dr. K's license removed, and I know you've talked about this before, at a couple different times and even here, but I kind of
Mhm.
wanted to ask you what you think about it without there being a lot of like pressure and like it's not a super hot topic right now. It might be again soon because I know he's like redoubling his efforts now and re-engaging with it.
Right.
Uh, so I kind of wanted to get like what your opinion is on um, like the fact that he like his end goal is pretty clear. He just wants him to not be able to practice psychiatry anymore. So I was wondering like outside of the really intense situations that you definitely find yourself in talking to the anybody else about this. How do you feel about that? And do you think that like internally to him that he's doing it for good reasons? So
I
you feel
think
free to
he
address if you think it's
feels
good or not. Yeah.
so he definitely feels that he's doing it for good reasons. Absolutely. Like I understand how he views Dr. K. I fully understand it. And from his view, he is basically trying to get what he would view as a serial predator offline, more or less. Like somebody who is absolutely taking advantage of people, making money from it, and not caring about them, and then kind of basically throwing the concern for the actual individual aside for his own personal gain. Like that's essentially what I think Max views Dr. K as, and from his view, yeah, you should be right. This is why I told when Max first told me I'm gonna like submit a complaint to the medical board. I was like, you should. Like if these are your concerns, you absolutely should. Like you're fully within your right to do that.
I think he'd be like insanely irresponsible if he felt the way he said and he didn't pursue it wholeheartedly. Like
mm,
I don't think he could feel the way that he says that he feels about it and not pursue it with everything. Like if he didn't, I feel like he would lose integrity.
if you are pursuing it,
Mhm.
and you're not vetting very carefully as to whether there's no space for you to potentially be incorrect, I think that might be a problem, in my view.
Sure.
Right? He's gone as far as saying if the ethics board even disagrees with him, then he wants to attack the ethics board, and that to me, I'm just like, mm-mm. So yes, I'd say he's being irresponsible, I suppose.
Well, I was still speaking from like an internal framing, though. But yeah, like yeah, you can comment on that outside of that perspective too. I don't mind. I'm not trying to shut that down or anything.
From an internal lens, the way he's approaching it is somewhat understandable. Um, but this is like the whole issue is like I'm concerned about the internal process. Like it doesn't seem like there's any check for like um, countering evidence of could I be wrong, essentially, right? I think he like unironically told Chud like there's no way he'll find any ethics board individual who like disagrees with him on that. Um, to be honest, I definitely know people who like are on ethics boards who like when I tell them, they're like, oh yeah, like there here are some things. So like just to be clear, I have criticisms of Dr. K. There are some probably like clear ethics breaches. I just don't know if it's the extent that Max feels that it is. Um, and when I've talked with like professors and stuff about this and like kind of outlined the situation, they're like, oh yeah, man, this is really fucking messy. It's especially messy, you know, that Byron ended up suiciding. Like that always just makes everything more messy. Um, and like
Sure, you can't even talk to
it
the person.
yeah well it's actually more than that. Like in
Sure.
psychology, anytime a client dies, there's oftentimes so there'll oftentimes be kind of like at least some level of like internal evaluation, um, because a lot of times like the ethics of a field has to be somewhat responsive to the culture and the world that the field is operating within. And so if like somebody suicides and there's like something that's like complicating and weird that might have been like in a gray area or like an unclear area of ethics, we have to kind of like it has to be explored, in case potentially like post talk, we realize like there's an ethic thing here that we need to correct and fix, essentially. Hold on, I'm just gonna shut the door.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
And
I have
so,
dogs,
yeah,
so I get noises.
right. So, like the first question that I told to Max that we actually have to answer is he even doing therapy? Like, is the disclaimer enough? And when I've talked with multiple other professionals in the field and they've like outlined the situation, I'm like, here are what his disclaimers are, here are what they not, and here's the thing where the disclaimers feel like they might not be fully sufficient. There, I've had a lot of professionals be like, oh man, fuck, like this is really complicated. Like it kind of is therapy and it also kind of isn't therapy because of the disclaimer. And so that's like the first thing actually the ethics board is going to have to decide. So they have to decide first and foremost if Dr. K is doing therapy. And I know everyone's like, what do you mean? It obviously looks like it's therapy. And it's like, just because something looks like it's therapy doesn't mean that it like contractually is therapy. And the ethics are for therapy. And then there's other behaviors as a professional as well that are outside of therapy that you're also ethically responsible. So if they decide it's not therapy, there are still some ethics that will apply that I would argue he has breached some of them. If it is therapy, there are additional ethics that also are probably violated, and they're going to have to decide that. And I have no idea what they're going to decide. And I've talked to lots of professionals about this and like outline the situation and stuff. And I've gotten a pretty mixed bag. Like I've had some be like, absolutely, it's not therapy, it's just not. And then others being like, oh, mostly it seems like it's not, but with like people where he has like repeat conversations with, it kind of is now. And so, yeah. Yeah, so it's not cut and dry. And this is like the first question that Max has to actually answer, and he doesn't seem willing to engage with it. But it's just not as cut and dry as we'd like it to be. And that's a problem, by the way. This is why I was actually excited to talk with Max originally, because I was like, this is a problem. He's saying it's not therapy, but it looks like therapy. It feels like therapy. And when he's seeing people on repeat or off stream privately, now it really feels like therapy. But is it?
Yeah.
And like, we as a field need to fucking answer that question. That's really important.
Yeah, when I just want to tell you something that happened, and I'm not gonna. This isn't my opinions or anything. So not today's Wednesday, yeah. So I think it was last Wednesday. Yeah, last Wednesday I saw my psychiatrist. Said, hey, how's it going? What's going on? Told him I'm working on this project, and he said, oh, well, who's that? What do they do? Mr. Girl. And I kind of went down real briefly, and I was trying to grab something that would be of interest, and I just kind of ran that down. And so I just tried to tell him like as many like facts about like the whole Dr. K thing as I could. And I was just trying to like, you know, say like this is one of the things I thought was interesting. And as I did, my therapist is like a super, super nice old guy. He's like, I usually don't like men psychiatrists or men therapists, and he won me over first visit. And when I kind of told him, he kind of just like leaned back and his like face got twisted up. And at one point he was like the confidentiality alone. And then he just like put his hands down and let me, cause like I'm paying like $200 for a half hour. I'm trying to like, move fast. And when I got to the end and said that, Rockful committed suicide, he just blurted out like sorry, it's a little anxious when I think about this. He kept like leaning further back and his face kept getting like more twisted and like painful, and he just sort of blurted out like, oh, he killed him. And I was like, well, we can at least say that he could have gotten like other treatment, like if it's like I think that we could have said like he could have gotten other treatment that could have been more helpful maybe. And then he just sort of shook himself. I was like, yeah. And then he moved on to the next thing, and I felt like I hurt him when I told him that. And I talked to my therapist about that when I saw her next. I feel really bad that I told Dr. I'm not going to say his name, because this, and she's like, well, why do you think you hurt him? I was like, I've never seen anybody's face look like that before. I just, it looked like it hurt him. And I don't think that I want to talk to anybody in the field about the Dr. K thing because of that. And I understand that people might have other opinions of it, but
Yeah.
like this guy's really stuck out his neck. He fought with pharmacists to make sure I could get my meds and stuff. And he made the owner of the place that him and my therapist work at pay me back because they charged me early. And I was like, hey, this is kind of fucking me. He's like, don't worry. And the owner sent me an email, said, what's your Venmo? And sent me the money back. This guy's he's like a straight G when it comes to psychiatry for his patients, and I felt like I heard him. So I think that maybe because of that too, I shouldn't really say a whole lot about Dr. K in general, because I think that maybe I can't have a very clear head about it because of the interaction that I had with my psychiatrist.
Yeah, it's really hard to say, depending on where you sit on the fence, right? The way that you communicate the situation is going to look one way, and the way that I communicate the situation, right? It's
Sure.
not overly surprising that Max, who feels this way, and he made a video and showed it to professionals, the professionals broadly had the same view of him. It's also interesting that when I tell professionals, they mostly seem to have the view that I have, right? Like that's the weird piece of like this is why I told Max it should go to the ethics board. That's a good idea. It's a really good idea because they're going to have all of the information for themselves to look through, and they're going to come to the best decision because, um, yeah, it's a really complicated situation, and depending on how you feel as an observer, you're going to communicate your experience of it in one way. So yeah.
Yeah. I I don't think that no matter how hard I try, I probably can't keep like any of the connotations from like watching the video and relaying just what I think is the facts. I probably can't do that very like as effectively as I would like to, at least, no matter how good I think I am at it.
Mhm.
Um, where do you think that you and him disagree the most on in like in terms of like psychology, like psychological ideology?
Um, it's really hard to. So it sounds. I could be wrong. You could correct me. I believe that Max believes that you can't change your feelings. You can only like repress them.
Yeah, I think he may have said exactly that, if I'm not mistaken. I think we're
So
operating under the same understanding.
okay, okay, sorry. Um, I would argue that the dominant body of psychological research really disagrees with that. In fact, most modern forms of therapy are to some extent focused around helping people figure out how to like healthily regulate and to like shift their emotions in a non-repressive way, um, by changing like thoughts, having healthy ways to internalize and externalize, increasing emotional tolerance, increasing emotional regulation. Um, a
Can,
lot of his views on psychology
can I ask a question
sound
about that?
I yeah, go ahead.
Um, now, I'm in no way trying to like say that like I disagree or anything. I just genuinely want to understand. So please take it as that. It sounds like the things that you're describing aren't changing the feelings, but how you interact with them. So it changes how you act in accordance with having them. Am I not understanding that
Not
correctly?
totally, right? So CBT, it kind of views emotions as like part of this triangular relationship of like emotions, thoughts, and behavior. And
Mm.
that like to some degree emotions inform your thoughts, which inform your behavior, but also your behavior informs your emotions and your thoughts inform your emotions. So they kind of all interrelate with one another. And so one way that you can change how you feel about a situation is, for example, to behave differently in the situation, or CBT mostly focuses on changing certain thoughts about a situation, right? And I don't think that like this is a clear all fix all
Mm.
for every single situation, but like CBT has a really high efficacy rate, seems to work decently well. And so the idea that like you can't change your emotions is pretty counter to a lot of CBT, where like fundamentally we're helping you change your emotions, not by denying them, but like working through and like seeing a situation in a different light, right? So for example, um, if you see your girlfriend walking down the road and she's like holding hot hands with another dude, you're probably going to feel some way like immediately. And you're going to
Hot
probably
hands?
feel, huh?
Hot hands?
Holding hands. Sorry. They're
Oh, I'm
holding
sorry. I
hands.
thought you said hot. I was like, is this a Canadian expression I'm not familiar with? Educate me, please. No, okay,
Yeah. So you
sorry. Go ahead.
see, so she's holding hands with a dude that you don't recognize. Maybe you've only been dating for 3 weeks. You're going to feel some sort of way, right? And then CBT would kind of argue probably your thoughts are going to be pretty negative. Looks like she's cheating on me because that's how it looks, right? She's holding hands. Maybe they're like pretty close. It seems pretty cushy, right? But maybe you get more information and then you later find out that this is like her brother or a cousin. And also, maybe he's also like gay. So like they're very, very warm and close and intimate, and there's no level of sexual tension at all. They just have a really close relationship, right? You're going to feel differently now because your thoughts and your perspective of the situation have shifted. And so, like in CBT, we would say like that's changing your emotions. Is like you can, and so a lot of, for example, anxiety. A lot of anxiety comes from like assuming the worst. They catastrophize, right? So like something happens and they're like, oh no, it's the end of the world. But in CBT, we'll say, well, what is a different way to view this situation, right? Say you think that a lot of people will be like, oh, my friend like ghosted me. They didn't text me back for like 2 days. They must hate me. And so a CBT therapist would be like, well, what are other ways that we could view this situation? Like, what are other possible explanations for why they ghosted you? And then you might go through a couple of explanations and it might be like, oh, well, she is really busy. You know, she's at a conference all weekend. And so it's possible that like, you know, she just doesn't have access to her phone. You're immediately going to feel differently based on that thought versus she hates me and is rejecting me, right? So like I guess now we're getting into quibbling of like what is emotional change, but in my view, that is actually changing your emotions because you feel differently about it afterwards, and oftentimes, ideally, you feel more okay about it.
That's CBT.
That's one element of CBT. I wouldn't say that's all of CBT, but that is like the thought changing process of CBT.
I feel like I pitch that to people all the time. Whenever somebody vents to me about another person, I have to stop myself from saying, well, maybe they didn't really mean it like that. Like I always do, people get mad at me.
Right.
So.
And just to be clear, I'm being really fast and reductive. It wouldn't be the stat.
Sure.
Like it wouldn't be a 5-minute conversation or anything like that. Because that
Sure,
makes it feel like you're just like, I know you think it's that, but also what's the silver lining? Like that's not how it works. I'm being very fast in how that works, just to be clear, so that people are like, wow, CBT sucks. Like
well, no, I guess. Well, thanks for at least clarifying, because I was like, am I like inherently being manipulative of other people's like emotions when I try to like I always say like I'm like a look on the bright side kind of person, or try to look at it from like a high level of charity. Thanks for clarifying, because I don't want to feel like I'm like emotionally manipulating people by trying to get them to consider maybe things aren't as bad as they are.
Right, as long as the person's willing to consider it in a different way, right? So, like, typically CBT is going to look like lots of rapport building in the beginning, right? Validating, reflecting feelings, being like, oh, it sounds like you feel like they'll be like, man, I was just so sad. And they'll be like, oh, it sounds like you were really upset. Or like, sounds like you were really sad. And the person's gonna be like, yes, I was sad. So they feel validated. And then you go, well, and then you start going into CBT and what we do, and you get the client on board, right? So you don't just like force people to think about things differently, but you explain the theory of CBT, why we do thought challenges, and then say, well, you're feeling this way. Remember what we talked about with CBT? Would you be willing to do a thought challenging process and like work through to see if we can feel a different way?
Like a bunch of opt-in things.
It's all going to be, we love consent in psychology. So
is the like when people read like off the things like I am worthy of love, I'm worthy of happiness. Like you ever see those sheets?
The affirmation stuff.
Is that like the same? Is that the same thing?
No. That's super ineffective. So here's the thing.
I don't think they work.
There's psychological empiricism, and then there is pop psychology.
Sure.
And they're not the same. Sure. And this is my concern, is if we remove professionals more and more from this space, we get more and more pop psychology. You know what I found on TikTok the other day? There is now a whole group, a whole brand of people calling themselves trauma-informed coaches. They're just people who have themselves typically gone through some form of like therapy and self-growth, and now they charge people for one-on-one sessions of coaching, but to work through like PTSD and trauma. And it is like the most, and it's like $200. It's like as much as a psychologist. Jeez. It's insane to me, right? And so I'm like, I feel like this is what we should be attacking. Yeah. It's right. And the issue is, and this is my concern, is I'm like, I think there are lots of concerns around Dr. K, but a lot of like much more like classically trained, more empirically driven people are already nervous about public space just because of how toxic the public space is. If we get on this bend of like attacking people's credentials constantly, the academics and practitioners that we want to be in this space are way less inclined, and I don't fucking blame them. I literally at times honestly regret telling people that I have any training, because I know people think I appeal to authority all the time. I actually almost never do. I try to say like, I'm just talking about the data. When people are like, I want to quote you saying this, I'm like, actually, you should cite the paper. Like, cite the paper, don't cite me. Like, just get the data. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a lot of people are much more like I see a lot of like the ADHD TikTok things where people talk about ADHD, and I have really bad ADHD to where like after getting it treated, like my depression is like almost not exist, like all my other symptoms that I've had issues
Yeah,
with my whole life, when this has
yeah,
been properly treated, it's like maybe those things weren't even like my psychiatrist like maybe these things weren't even going on. Maybe your ADHD was just so bad that it caused these other problems for you. So when
yeah.
I hear
You weren't
people
sad because you're depressed. You're sad because your life was chaos because of ADHD. Yeah.
Yeah, so when I hear people talk about ADHD and like here are my ADHD, I'm like that could be so many things. Like I've been told to read this and read that by my psychologist and my psychiatrist and like throughout my life
Hmm.
about it. I'm like you really shouldn't be telling people that like these are symptoms of ADHD because now everybody's going to have ADHD. You know, sometimes everybody lays on the couch all day and doesn't feel motivated to do anything. Like, and when you tell people that, they're just gonna think like, "Oh my god!" Like my buddy always sends me the autism TikToks, and he's like, "Oh my god, I feel so attacked. Like, I think I need to get myself tested for autism. Like, I think I like my guy. None of these people have any reason to be talking to you about this. As
Hmm.
informal as TikTok is, like, please don't." And then like when he sends it to me, sometimes I watch them, and like it'll freak me out because I'll just be like, just watch and be like, "Yeah, I need to just turn this off because this is bad for me." I shouldn't let these things enter my brain. It's pretty scary. I think that people are just kind of deciding that they know psychology and that they
Yep.
have the authority to tell people, and it freaks me out really bad. I
Yep.
see, it's very. They have like 1 million likes on these videos and like 10 million views. It's
Yep.
really scary.
Yep.
So I would understand that.
And then they go get stimulants and they're like, I focus more. And I'm like, well, that's what stimulants do to everyone. But how's your anxiety? And they're like, I'm skyrocketing. And I'm like, yeah, anxiety and stimulants don't mix super well if your problem is anxiety, because anxiety and depression often look just like ADHD, especially for the distraction subtype. So
Yeah,
yeah, But if it is ADHD, you need to get that properly treated. So that's why we
yeah,
need a biological measure for ADHD. We need something as if it's neurodevelopmental, there's got to be some biomarker we can find eventually. I pray, because that would solve a lot of our issues.
I thought and I could 1000% be wrong with. I thought that you don't respond as strong to like the heart rate increase if you have ADHD when you take a
Yes.
stimulant. That is like
So
the
there
major biomarker, right?
No, so actually their heart rate, oh, I need to look up. Somebody sent me a paper a while ago, and every time I didn't spend enough time reading it, so I can't like report it. But basically, their heart rate variation, um, their heart rate variation on one side. So like you basically like your heart speeds up and slows down like pretty naturally, and on the speed up side or the slow down side, they don't go back to baseline as quickly. Like there's a pretty small deviation, but a really significant one, really consistently, that's starting to be found out. I need to find the paper on it again so I can report it. And if you want it, I can send it to you. I'll find it. But
Yeah,
it's
absolutely. Because I've
so
talked about
cool.
that.
It's really exciting. And then there's a recent study that came out actually about autism that showed that the amygdala, a very specific part of the amygdala, is consistently enlarged in children with autism, like well past the age of 1, and it maintains its size. And it's still preemptive, but it's like it might be potentially, but again, we still have to vet it, we still have to compare. But if we could get another biomarker for like autism as well, because there's a lot of people starting to be like, I'm autistic, I'm autistic, I'm autistic. And I'm like, it might be a mixture of like social anxiety and like not getting taught a lot of good social skills.
Yeah,
Um, it might be that you like are more of a rigid type personality plus social anxiety, but might not actually be autism. Um, and also autism's a spectrum. I mean, autism's a whole messy
yeah.
world. We don't need to get a ton into autism. Yeah,
It's a huge
there's
umbrella. I don't even know what it means anymore, to be perfectly honest. If somebody says they have autism, I have no idea what that looks like, just based on the word alone.
Yeah, and it feels like people are starting to use it like autism is like this armor now. And so it feels like there's like this motivation to like claim autism for the purpose of like shielding yourself from some level of like social responsibility, which is really shitty to autistic people when they're like, hey, my life struggles aren't a reason for you not to be responsible. As an autistic person, I'm fully responsible for the things that I do. And also I need extra grace because it might take me like a little bit longer or more work to figure it out. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
really complex. And this is why it's interesting. Like I think that we should and can attack Dr. K for a lot of his stuff, but we're not attacking, at least in the Twitch poll, all these TikTokers. who are charging people $200 an
I
hour
didn't know that was
for
happening.
private coaching sessions. And it's like, yes, what he's doing publicly and all that stuff, there might be some issues with it. But what about this shit? Might be worse. It's probably worse.
Well, in
Or
all
at least
fairness,
different. You know, if it's not worse, it's at least different and problematic.
that's yeah. It's I think anybody acting in place of a therapist and charging people like large amounts of money. I think there's a difference. Like my wife and I have tried like there's like it's like a $10 a week thing where like somebody just like talks to you on Facebook, which is very clearly
Mm.
not therapy. It just kind of like guided talking to like help us like not argue when we talk about things. Basically, it's very clearly
Yeah, like
not
a
marriage
mediator.
counseling. Yeah, it's essentially just a mediator that has like knowledge about the thing that we fight about.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's fine because it's very clearly what it is, and they kind of vet you to make sure that you understand what's going on and like what the situation is and all that. But as opposed to
Mm.
somebody, what are they called again?
Which
The
trauma
TikTok people?
informed coaches.
Yeah, that's fucked. Like
It's
the
fucked. I found it the other day, and I'm like deep diving into this world, and I'm like, I've got like 4 scripts going on for a video essay, and I need to focus on one. But holy shit, it's really. If you want, I can send you their TikTok account, and we can
uh,
be mean to them together if
y-
you want. Oh
yeah, I
man,
do. And
it's so bad. And she has a retreat center. She's huge. She has a retreat center now. She's got like multiple coaches underneath her. It's
this sounds
insane.
illegal. It just sounds
I
illegal.
know. And I'm sorry, but people are attacking Dr. K. And I'm like,
Well,
this is worse. Ah! She has coaches. She's not even trained and she has coaches. Like, I don't even agree with his coach thing. And she's not even a psychiatrist and she has coaches under her. Like, oh my gosh. Holy shit.
somebody said, "Is she talking about Brittany Simon?"
No, it's not
I
Brittany Simon.
they were joking. They were joking.
Yeah, that's fair. But just to be clear, it's not because somebody might actually think that. It's not Brittany Simon. I don't even think Brittany Simon's on TikTok, actually.
Wow, yeah. So I didn't say this prior, but when I originally went to college, I went for psychology, and
Oh, cool.
I didn't have a fine that I didn't pay, and I went to jail for not paying that fine because I was broke and just going to school, and
Mm.
I other people got to leave to go to like school, and I wasn't given access to a computer, so I could at least participate in that because the school was cool, and I
Oh,
got booted. Yeah, the sergeant
oh,
didn't
I'm
like
sorry.
me. And but I'm hoping in the next few months to start back up for that. It's to be like a mental health counselor,
Oh,
being
that's
being
really exciting.
the short term goal. So I have a lot
Mm.
of like I've nerded out and read a lot of stuff just throughout
Mm.
my life because I've been really interested. So that really freaks me out. I wouldn't
Yes.
say that I'm like a super well informed person that people should come to for like advice about it, but I think I've read enough about and like have participated in my classes enough to know that that's
Mm-hmm.
fucking terrifying. And like
Yep.
I like I guess more than the average person does if they think that that's like a they keep hitting like on it and not criticize it. Like, are their comments super positive too?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you don't know
Christ.
to what degree they've got bots and stuff like deleting negative comments, but um,
Well,
I've
I
been
think
careful not to make a negative comment so I can continue to lurk, so I don't get banned or
well
something.
well then I'll be your control and I will start blowing that shit up when I'm on there. You can compare because I that's I had no idea. I knew the ADHD and the autism like TikTok like
Mm-hmm.
I think like ADHD talk is like a hashtag on TikTok. That's how
It
prominent
is,
it
yeah,
is. Because at first I was like oh these things resonate with me. Like this is nice to feel a little seen. And then I started thinking about like this is really fucking bad.
yeah.
Like when I started thinking about how broadly these things can be applied. Yeah, wow. Uh, thank you for that. I'm gonna be like obsessively freaking out about the fact that that's going on because that's the amount of harm that can be caused. Like the widespread that's really scary. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, and there's some stuff that she's like saying is like empirically based, and I'm like, I can't find great sources. And every time, again, like I tend to operate in very much like a space of like, if I haven't heard it before and it sounds weird, I don't want to believe it. But then another part of me is like, you should probably check it because like, what if there's just new science out there and you don't want to be, you never want to be the boomer who's like, that's not true, and you're like, doctor, you've been out of school for 40 years and never read a paper since you left. It is true,
right.
right? You don't want to do that either. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's and I think that all of those things are bad, but it seems like So if I were to frame Dr. K as bad, I would say like that's like a sniper in a building, and this person just seems like they have like a Tommy gun just walking through a crowd, just like blindly like whoever they can get. That's really like the
Yeah,
access
it's
to
hard to
recruiting
compare.
people. Well, I'm saying
It's
if
hard to compare. Yeah, but yeah,
just
it's a
like
little.
the reach and the numbers at which a person can get to as an individual, like TikTok, you can reach so many more people so fast. I made stupid videos about my car on TikTok and I got 40,000 views on it, having never like done TikTok before.
It's
And
pretty
I look
good.
at my metrics on, I it makes me really mad. I wish my YouTube or Twitch seen a fraction of
I
that.
know,
Like
I
a
know.
40-second video of me holding up the speaker that I'm going to put in my car. And I don't know if it's just because I don't do car stuff and that was the premise. But
Yeah.
like I think TikTok is just like it's just like a garbage factory, and I was so mad to see that like anything did good, and like almost all of them have over 1,000 views on them, and like I have followers on TikTok, and I don't even fuck with it anymore. I just did it
Mhm.
for like I did it to mess with my buddy so I could send him the videos because he's like you shouldn't work on your car, so I just made that. And just to think that like if that can reach 40,000 people, the amount of people that uh I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm going on too long about it because it's that the amount of anxiety that's induced by thinking about that is terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, like,
I didn't even
I'm
say
not
anything.
sure. Like, as you get into the field, you're gonna start to realize, like, this is why I say, like, not all psychologists are the same. Like, there's a reality that some counseling psychologists just aren't actually experts of psychological research based on their training, whereas, like, researching psychologists tend to be experts on the empiricism of psychological research.
Sure.
And I already have these concerns about registered psychologists, and now we're like have a world where like non-professionals, and this is my main concern with some of the Dr. K crusade, is I'm worried professionals are going to be even more hesitant to come into the space. And I agree, the issues with the TikTok stuff are different issues than the Dr. K, and I think both are
Very.
potentially, they're both valid things to critique. However, if there's a fixation on like, at least Dr. K, again, he spreads some stuff that is not super empiric sound. Like a lot of his Ayurvedic stuff isn't like the best. Um, but a lot of his
Oh
like
sure.
foundational psych stuff is really empirically sound. Like his psychoeducation is pretty solid, barring like a couple of weird things, right? Um, if we get him off the platform,
I
somebody's going to replace that niche, and they might be even less trained. And the space is going to motivate basically failed academics or non-academics to come into the space more than academics, which we don't want, right? Like, there are critiques to make of Dr. K, right? For example, you should probably be like Max and really telling people like go to therapy. I do think he does tell people to go to therapy, but like probably more, right? Um, but we don't want to
It
replace
would
that
really
with
help
people
draw the
who.
distinction too.
Mhm. Yeah.
Sorry, go on. I just wanted to blurt that out to agree with you there.
No. I feel like I get long winded and I say the same thing like six times. So I was just stopping. So I was like, I think I said it.
Yeah, I did that on the TikTok thing for sure. Uh yeah, is there anything that you would want to say considering the project that I'm working on about Max?
Say about Max, or say
Yeah,
about.
say about Max, or I mean, or the project, whatever. Just is there anything you'd want to say considering the project that I'm making? Like,
And your goal, to my understanding, is just to like present the complex nature of who Max is and like what he's doing.
so I would say that the overall aim of my project is to I wanna. So I would say that like this right now is part of the project. Like even the things that don't make it into it, like me doing the streams and me talking to the people, is part of the project. Me sort of like the fact that it was so successful when I asked so many people to be a part of it and they did, I think I get a sense of like probably how some of the beginning parts of his streams felt where I was just making like my own thing in my own space and then all of a sudden I'm talking to people and I have to put a lot of work into it. It's very overwhelming and
Mm-hmm.
just interacting at a much different level. And then the other part of the so like I'm kind of like getting in the mindset and having a better understanding too of what that was like, and I can present that as well. But just the idea of how he was able to carve himself out of space in the Twitch and YouTube the commentary politics space and be seemingly like bulletproof and uncancelable, save for like Twitch booting him, but that wasn't like a typical kind of canceling. And like it jumped off when Destiny had him on, but like since then he's really like made his own way and sort of made that space, and he's built a community
Mm-hmm.
of people. And I want to talk about that a lot, and I want to talk about the people that don't agree with him, the people that don't like him. I want to make sure that the criticisms that exist are expressed well, and then why, and then like to contrast that with like here's the people that really support him and why they support him, knowing that these criticisms exist. Here's why we're here. Here's why we show up for every Mr. Girl hotline. Here's why we watch the videos that come out. This is why this matters to us. And then I kind of want to focus on the community at large too, like the Mr. Girl community, because as wild as that Discord gets, I've seen some truly amazing things come out of it. One of the people in it was having a tough time, and I said something to one person, and a lot of people reached out to them. So I think that the community is, while sometimes buck fucking wild, I think that it's a really good one, and I think it's full of a lot of good, caring people, and I think that it's good to have an overview of that community. It's good to have an overview of like the career so far of Max, and I think it's a good idea to have an overview of the criticisms of him, along with some of the things that I wanted to add in with like a little bit more of an artistic flair that would be separate from those parts of the project. That's kind of my best way I can describe what I'm going for. It'll make sense when it comes out, unless I'm terrible at this, in which case everybody's going to be embarrassed that they talk to me and they're going to hide their face in shame, as I do when everybody who I've talked to watches it on their stream. Oh, you're muted. Oh,
There we go.
there
Sorry,
you go.
I had to. My husband was in the next room. I can't comment on his community, and I can't comment on the overall impact, like his hotline and everything's happening. I'm not a part of it at all, so I can't comment on that. And I don't know if it's doing a net good. It's probably helping some, which is good, but it might also be doing harm. It's really hard to quantify these things online. And to be clear, the same is also true for me. I might be doing a net good. I might be doing a net neutral. I also might be doing a net bad. It's really hard to quantify these things. I guess maybe all I would say is like I could be wrong, but I think when it comes to like Max's followers and his community specifically, I think if you look at Max as like the ultimate authority on thought and opinion, if you tend to basically just wholly agree with him in every way, I don't even think that that's what he's going for, and you might be missing him still, because I don't think he wants me to like look at him as like the beacon of thought and like intellect. Um, I think he's a human who's got a lot of struggles, probably more than the average, but probably not more than the average, like Mr. Girl follower. I imagine there's a level of like camaraderie there. And he's wading through his own like life and shit and trying to like make sense out of this like messy little world. And I think if there's anything you can pull from Max, it's to like do the same. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think that watching his stuff has helped me communicate more honestly. I think I found the things that I found little things that I think like, oh, that would be really useful if I did that more. So I think I really agree that I think that's a good way to look at how to engage with not just his content, but with online content in general. That we should be really smart when we try to uh, pick the things that we want to emulate from people. Because I know that like DGG is like notorious for trying to do some of the things Destiny does, and it just makes them sound like belligerent assholes because they
Mm.
can't quite do that. It's I think that's been mentioned quite a bit by Destiny. I think that makes a lot of sense. Um, so
Your mic's cutting out just a little bit, just so you know.
that is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
I'll say I think that makes a lot of sense. And not only do I want to say thank you, I had a feeling that this was going to be really fun, and it has been really really fun. You were so nice to me when we talked, and oh, it when I showed like one of my coworkers when I asked to confirm that we were doing this today, your answer to me made me like you 100% more. You said yuppers beppers, and I was like, she's a good one, 100%.
She said the
People,
phrase.
well, I didn't even know the phrase, but like when people can be that silly on the fly to people they don't know, I respect the fuck out of that. I wish
Mm.
people were a little more silly in general. Um, when I reached out to you, I'd pretty much seen everything that you did that like was on YouTube that involved anybody that I watched, and but you're pretty good, interesting. I started watching a little bit more in your streams and on Twitter. One of the tweet interactions you had with somebody made me choke on my water and literally fall over. And I still try to show it to people. Like I'll cover up like where you came in just so they could have the same experience as me.
I'm so
And
curious which one that is.
so,
I've limited myself to only 1 hour on Twitter a day now because I think it's gonna make me a bad person. And
it
I've watched it make a couple of people bad people over time. So I'm like, you know what? Only an hour a day. It's a guilty pleasure though. There's something fun to just like being like on Twitter.
I've thrown out Facebook and I try not to let Twitter become a new Facebook for me. I got involved in one single tweet thread from the Omni Liberal, and I still have people getting mad at me for what I said and blowing up my
Mm-hmm.
phone here and there. So I think that was a good lesson that I learned.
Mm-hmm.
But the tweet was Stardust just said, Madam, 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 Madam. And I was like, all right, I'll bite. Let's see. And I clicked it, and your answer, like your answer to the calls, honk, 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 honk. And I was so not fucking ready for that. I was like sitting on my phone at my computer, like just, oh no, I was sitting at my computer, and I clicked it, and I was drinking some water, and I choked, and I went to go like move to set down my water, and when I did, I coughed really hard, and I just fell over. My water stayed, nothing got ruined. And I was like, oh my God, you have to warn me first. That is like off the charts silly. And so yeah, I since I've been watching more of your stuff, I say you're a legitimately funny woman, and
Thanks.
that's really
Appreciate that.
cool. Uh,
It's a
how
big
does it?
vouch. Women can be funny.
Yeah, how does it feel to
Woo!
be the first
I
one?
did it.
Yeah,
You know who I actually love as a comedian? What is her name? Oh fuck, Eliza.
Eliza Minnelli.
She no, it's like an SCH last name. Hard to pronounce. I don't know. It doesn't matter. There's at least two of us.
Eliza Schuler? Nope, that's a Eliza Schelsinger, right? Is that?
Yes, she's pretty funny.
Yeah, I'm
Like sometimes some of the tropes get a little like where like you can't watch her all the time because it's kind of the same stuff all the time, which is like I'm a man, da, 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 da. I'm a woman, and I'm a woman, da, 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 da. But it's pretty funny.
I'm a really big comedy buff. I actually I'm streaming with a friend of mine, Kia Weird, tomorrow because he has garbage takes on comedy. He puts like Gabriel Iglesias and Jeff Dunham in the same category as like George Carlin and stuff. Like he's like, oh, if I laugh, then it's funny, then it's just good. I'm like, we're fighting. We're gonna stream together about this because I hate what you just said so much. But I
Mm.
think that yeah, like I said, I think that you're really funny. And I don't think that like particularly like the best judge of it or whatever, but I appreciate the fact that you're funny. Like I said, congratulations on being the first funny woman. But that I'm joking.
I know you are.
Obviously I'm joking. You're not funny. No women are. No.
True. Based. There you go. There's the real black pill take. Okay, I have one question for you before I let you run away.
Oh, sure.
All right, so after all the Max and I drama, he finally just said, "I'm not going to talk about people without them being there," which is great. However, after his Chud stream, it was
Hmm.
interesting. It was not after him and I's discussion. It was after him and Chud talked about Max and I. I have been getting probably the largest volume of like weird, cringy, aggressive haters since then that are like, I'm very like anti just like strict banning people, especially at my size. I'd rather like interlocute and stuff. But I've had a lot of people coming in making some pretty heinous accusations about my practice, about me, not just as like a streamer, not just saying like you're dumb and stupid and a woman, but more like you're a fucking piece of garbage human shit and like stuff like this, right? It doesn't really make me sad, but it makes me really uncomfortable
Sure.
because I don't feel like this is something Max would want coming out of his community, but I also don't know if they're directly from him, but it's very distinctly like emails. I've gotten a couple of emails that have been really weird, some DMs from people that have been really uncomfortable, that are like really attacking me, and it feels very much it almost always is in the vein of some level of like Mr. Girl. I don't know if Max would want me to report that to him. Obviously I could ask him directly. I'm just curious, as a viewer, how, as somebody who's in his Discord especially, how would you recommend like navigating that as a streamer? Because I don't just want to like necessarily outright ban them, but also I don't feel like this is something Max would actually want coming out of his community. Would guess.
I think that any of the things that you said are a decent way to go about it. I think that.
Sorry, just get
Oh,
closer to your mic again.
sorry.
No
It's
worries.
it's it's a new mic, so I'm not
You're
used to,
good.
and I got it to like knock out the background noises, so I'm not really used to having to be up on it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to be more aware. Um, so I can say that the community overall is pretty good and supportive, and I can't imagine that like there's a like a hive mind purpose to try to like take you down or anything
No,
like
I
that.
know it's the fringe. I know it's the fringe
Yeah.
elements. I'm fully aware of that. Like
Yeah.
that's not my concern. But I'm saying typically when you have enough of these fringe elements, I don't know. Like Destiny wants to be notified so he can just cross ban. Usually Chud does. I have no idea, and I know the mods in his Discord manage the community a little bit more than actually Mr. Girl does directly. Is my understanding.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm in a weird position. Like I'm a YouTube mod and I'm very much not a Discord mod because I'm not active enough in it to like do that because I just have too much stuff going on. But I think that I have a really positive relationship with the mods in there. Like I'm in the mod Discord like section of the Discord. I have access to that. And I know that the things that like I'm privy to all the conversations and all that. If you are like so baby is the one who runs it.
Yeah.
And I would say that it's totally fine to reach out to baby if you want to say something to me privately about it, and I can bring it to attention. That's fine too. I don't know how much uh, like Max doesn't have a huge hand in his Discord. It's kind of like all the messages that I get about it is like it's kind of weird for him to like be super involved with it. I feel like the vibe I get is that he thinks it's kind of cringy to have that level of involvement in like a community about him.
Mm-hmm.
So how I would say baby is like a great person to talk to. Um, I've talked to him quite a bit, and he's pretty like level-headed and passionate about doing this right. When I see the rules and when I see people getting reported, there's actually like debate like, did this person actually do anything like this better? Like, how bad should the punishment be for this? Because we want to encourage people to correct their mistakes and stay. Like, is it bad enough to where like we just can't deal with this ever again? And that's very rarely the case. But I think that maybe attacking other communities might meet that criteria. So I think that like baby is a good person to talk to. If you can't
Mm-hmm.
reach him or whatever, like I said, you can always message me and I can bring it up in there too. Because I can't think of anybody in the moderator part of it that would be okay with any of that happening. And I think that it would, like, speaking as a non-Discord mod who is definitely involved with Discord mods in the conversations. I think that
Mm-hmm.
it's a pretty important thing to make sure that this isn't coming from the community.
Well,
And I
I don't know if it's coming from the Discord at all. I don't even know if it's coming from Max. All I know is that it increased dramatically after Max's conversation with Chud, and it's exclusively typically YouTube commenters, actually. It's not typically in
oh,
Discord. Actually, our Discords blend a fair bit, and we have a pretty good relationship with most of the people that come back and forth. Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
So if it's YouTube, I would really recommend shooting me a name and I can keep an eye out too and
Okay.
see
I'm
kind
not
of what's
personally,
going
like, I'm
on.
not like, it's not my fifis. I'm just like, for me as a content creator, if somebody in my name would be saying these things to other streamers, I would want to know so that I could, like, manage it and be like,
No,
potentially, like, banning them from my community. That's the only reason why I ask.
no, and I'm speaking as a moderator for it, and I think our moderation works a little bit different. Like since you're saying it's YouTube, especially, I've asked directly to Max, like, hey, can you give us a good guideline as to like what you do and don't want? Because some of the things look like kind of on the edge. Like I would probably permaban somebody for this, but like maybe that's not in the vein that it should be. And his answer is, you do what you think is right. Essentially, like we have been picked to do this thing because we have enough credibility within the community and to Max that like he's just trusting us to do what we think is correct. So if you ever want to send me any of that stuff, I can take a look at it and kind of gauge what I think when I'm seeing these people. If there's any if they're in our community on YouTube and chatting and stuff, can kind of take appropriate actions and talk to other mods and see like what we think is going on with this, because I don't want that to be our YouTube scene. I'm pretty vigilant on there. Uh, I know when I've not banned, like when I've not like muted somebody for 300 seconds or like or timed out somebody for 300 seconds or muted them and somebody else gets there before me, I'm like, oh wow. And people are like, yeah, you usually get there before me. Like, I know. So we work pretty
Yeah.
hard. So like it's almost like a race to get the thing off the
Yeah,
screen.
and like
So we
I'm
take
fine
it pretty
managing it on my
serious.
own. Like my fifis are, I'm just like, I don't know what communities
I
want me
don't
to do as far as like reporting this back to them. Cause I would want to know if like, for example, like say like a regular chatter for me is cat dog bark. If somebody was like, hey, just so
we
you
have
know,
cat
you
dog
had a
bark.
disagreement with Mr. Girl, and cat dog bark is always going in Mr. Girl's chat and telling him what a piece of shit and like just like really attacking him and like in my name and stuff like that, I'd be like, hey, just so that it's clear, this is not happening. I just, his name's on screen, their name is on screen, and I recognize them a lot. And
I
there's
think
just
I
a
might be framing
couple
it
that I
bad.
recognize from your guys' community that come in a lot that are just like, it's just like, I just argue with them and shame them mostly. Like I'll just read their comment and talk about how like either misogynistic or stupid it is. But I don't know what you guys would want me to do with that, if you want that feedback or not.
Yeah, well, so I think maybe I was framing it bad by saying like if you want to. Sorry, let me change the framing of that and saying uh we want that. We want to know
Okay.
what's going on.
Sure.
Please have some kind of line of communication. I didn't mean it like well if you're so butthurt about it then
No,
you can
I
say
did
something.
hear that. I just want to make it clear for like my own community as well that
Yeah,
like this isn't a butthurt thing, because sometimes like my own community will kind of like sometimes I think go too much on the defense of me, which again, everyone's an adult, you get to do what you want, but it's like it's okay. Like I'm an adult. You don't have to like my fifis are fine. I just at a business level know that some people want that communication and others honestly don't. So
and I I I don't think you really need to justify what it's for or anything like that. I think that
it's for my
if
fifis.
I just think I think that if it's happening at all, we would like to know. I
Yeah.
know that we don't want to end up being known as like a brigade community or anything like that. I can't imagine Mr. Girl having any other response but like disappointment or like shock or hurt. Like I can't imagine any like positive emotion coming from that. And I know that none of the moderators that I talk to, YouTube or Discord, would be happy to know that that's going on. I think
Mm-hmm.
that people say enough bad things that aren't true about Mr. Girl in the community that we don't need any other problems going on.
That's kind of what I thought. Yeah. Like there's things that when people come in and when they criticize me, I'm like, yeah, this makes sense. And then there's other things that come in and I'm like, ooh, uh-oh, yikesy, you know?
Yeah, and that's my job to make sure that the community on YouTube, like it's not just YouTube chat. If we're moderating our chat, we want to make sure that people aren't in our chat for malicious reasons to find things that they can use to target other people with. That's not what they're there for. They're supposed to be there to engage with the community while they enjoy the content.
Mm,
Not finding bullets, you know.
yeah. Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I think that's the first time I've heard of that, and I wish it wasn't the first time somebody brought it to my attention. I wish I would have known before I got here, because that seems like something that we should be talking about more. And I think that's something I'm going to bring up. That
I
I hope
know.
that we can communicate a little bit better with that.
It's something I think streamers need to improve overall, but people like attack each other over this so much that I feel like it's hard to bring it up and not have somebody feel like you're immediately just saying your community's trash and garbage and you're a bad person, because that's typically how it's brought up. But it's like I genuinely want to know, just show me the screenshots of what they said, just know I may decide not to ban them, and you can't tell me to, like, I'm not going to tone police people. Like if I show it to you guys, like there's just a lot of misogyny, which in fairness, based on Max's like stuff with women, is not surprising, right? And so like when it's coming up a lot, it's like you guys might choose that it's okay, you guys might not. I'm not actually gonna have fifis either way, but I don't know what you guys want me to do with it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna just verbally, you know, go at it with them in my chat. But
yeah,
yeah,
and like I said, I can't promise that we'll see it and be like, oh yeah, we feel the same way or anything like that. But
you don't
I
have
think
to. I don't. You don't have. It's
correct.
your community. That's fine with me. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that it would I think that having that kind of communication between what's going on across streams like that can only be positive for Twitch in general.
Mm. Hmm.
So thanks for telling. Oh, and well, sorry, YouTube in general in this case.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Sorry, I'm wiggling so much because I have to go to the bathroom. It's super bad,
yeah,
but I feel like
it's
we're
good.
right at the end, so I don't want to be like, "Hey, can you wait 2 minutes?" And then you're like, "We get back," and you were like, "Bye."
Yeah,
Is there anything else? Because if
no,
there is,
just
I'm gonna run to the washroom, and if there's not,
I just wanted to I'll give you the short version of the thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I had a lot of fun and I thought I would. So I appreciate you a lot.
awesome. Absolutely. Thanks for asking me, and thanks for not trying to like pigeonhole me into like answering and getting like weird questions that I don't want to
Nope,
paint it in such a way.
I hope that I dismissed the expectations that you might have had when I first approached you.
It did. Right. I have to run.
Yeah.
I'm
So
sorry.
yeah,
I'm gonna
go
die.
pee. Go pee. She did a big boogie out of there. Well, what a champ for holding it like that. Well, I guess I really appreciate that too. Then I probably wouldn't. Yeah, that's some pain running out there like that. Yeah, I knew that this was gonna be a good one and a fun one, but I think that this was a lot cooler stream than I expected it to be. Still, even though I had high expectations. And I also really like, even looking at the time, it went by pretty fast. She didn't really try to rush me or anything like that. I think that if anything, this has only painted my idea of Erudite in a better light. I'm not going to say what I think about the relationship between Max and her at all. At least not until the video comes out. But I really, just in general, have a better view.
Imagine you release the video and you're just like this bitch, and you like do like a bunch of like dumbass like because you're so chill and you're very much like do like I'm just a nice guy and I'm just willing to listen and be pretty good faith and just like hear you out. And then imagine your video drops and you keep on doing like jump cuts of my face, like if I like make a weird face, or like when I like was like holding my pee too long and I'm like squinting, you like drop like sunglasses down and it's just like a full fucking meme. Oh,
Can you see me
that
on?
would blow my brain.
Can you see me at all? I didn't know if you like had the stream pulled up on the other side to see it all.
No,
Um,
no, I get worried about my
well,
upload, so I try to keep it minimal.
well, let me just say I really appreciate all the really nice things you just said about me. A lot. I've gotten a couple little bits of feedback from people here or there. One person that I would just say is like a fan, which is weird, and that's a lot of the things that I get. But I I try to be all those things, but um, I know you don't watch the hotline at all. Soon, I was next in line 2 weeks in a row, and then second next in line to go on the last week. But it just depends on who shows up and where you're at on the list. I'm debating him on veganism because everybody that talks to him
Hmm.
is batshit fucking crazy when they talk about it, except for perspective philosophy. But he can't speak Mr. Girl at all. And they spent 3 hours not talking about veganism. I got them two together. I asked Perspective Philosophy to reach out and told Mr. Girl he's gonna, and they did. And it was fine. It was a good stream. It was 5.5 hours long, right before he got banned. So it was like the season finale for me. It was like, oh, the two guys I want to talk are gonna talk. But the veganism conversation was really bad. I think I know how to talk to
Mm.
him well. I know his positions and all that. So I don't, and I'm gonna be bombastic as fuck. The whole point of the hotline is to be bombastic. So everybody that says I'm super nice when I stream, I think you can see me when I don't have to. I mean, I don't have to be nice when I feel like it's not appropriate to be super nice and to be a lot more aggressive.
Yeah.
But but
Do you
generally,
get like
I am
President
super
Sunday
nice.
vibes?
I haven't seen any President Sunday stuff. People keep saying stuff, but I've been.
Oh no, you're missing out on the best memes.
Yeah, somebody told me I should talk to President Sunday because he doesn't like Mr. Girl, and it's so hard to find people that don't like him that want to talk to me. And like
Mm.
the one person that said no to me was Vaush, which I'm not surprised at all, but he was surprisingly nice about it. Like he was like
Yeah.
super nice at saying that he's too busy to do it and all that. But that would have been like the biggest person I think that would say like, here's why I don't like him, and like this and this, and like fuck that guy, because I really want to present that with integrity. But I think I probably he's on my list of people to reach out to, but I got to see something of him so I at least know how to approach him.
He's on my list. Do you
Well,
have a list? A mixed viv list?
I had a list of people that I wanted to talk to. And like I said, everybody that was on like these would be super important for the Mr. Girl narrative said yeah, including yourself. And then I have some like other people that just sort of haven't got back with me or whatever. I really wanted to get Brittany, but there's like no good way for me to reach out to her without paying like money to be into a thing or something. So so she's probably like the only one that's like out of reach for me really. But other than that, like I have pretty much everybody. And I just need to find some more people that don't like him to talk to me. But yeah, I know I know I already said goodbye. But you came with a really good thing. But I think I'll use you running to the bathroom, super hard bolting. I'm probably just gonna use that for the end of the project. Like at the end, it's just gonna be you bolting out and going to the bathroom. I probably won't do that, but
That's fair. I don't know if that's going to be the best representation of me. They're just like, man, this girl. I don't know. People are weird about bathroom shit. Probably especially women. We're like especially like.
Or maybe just an animated emoji in my Discord. I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna use that for anything.
Okay.
You bolted.
I did bolt. I had to go really bad. Like really, it was painful. I had to go. It was time.
It's a testament
I drank
to
too much
how
water.
polite you are. Well, all right. I will quit bothering you. I'll get out of your hair. I really appreciate you. Like I said, it was a ton of fun. And I hope you have a great night.
I hope you have a good night as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Good luck on the project. Let me know when it
you.
drops so I can promo it.
I will not shut up about it for like a week when it comes out. So
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.